The Complete Story of Annarasumanara, a manhwa about magic, dreams, and growing up. Welcome back to 2 Sleep Manhwa, where we explore the beautiful, heartbreaking, and thought-provoking worlds hidden within the pages of Korean manhwa. Today, we're diving into one of the most profound and visually stunning works in the medium, Annarasumanara by Il-kwon. This is not just a story about magic tricks and illusions. It's a philosophical journey into what it means to grow up, to lose yourself, and perhaps most importantly, to find yourself again in a world that demands you become something you're not. Over the next couple of hours, we'll unravel every layer of this masterpiece. We'll walk through the abandoned amusement park where dreams go to hide, meet the mysterious magician who refuses to grow up, and follow a young girl's journey from despair to hope. We'll explore the pressures that society places on youth, the cost of conformity, and the radical act of believing in something magical when the world insists you be practical. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's step into the world of Annarasumanara. Do you believe in magic? Chapter 1. The World of Annarasumanara. Before we meet our characters, we need to understand the world they inhabit. Annarasumanara takes place in modern South Korea, but it's painted in shades of grey that feel almost timeless. The manhwa is primarily illustrated in black and white, with only occasional bursts of colour that mark crucial turning points in the narrative. This artistic choice isn't merely aesthetic. It reflects the emotional landscape of the story itself. A world drained of vibrancy, where the everyday struggles of poverty, academic pressure, and social expectation have leached the colour from life. The setting is a typical Korean neighbourhood surrounding a high school called Suwon High School. On the surface, it looks like any other community with its convenience stores, small apartments, and the constant hum of urban life. But beneath this ordinary veneer lies something darker, a society that grinds down anyone who doesn't fit its narrow definitions of success. The streets are clean but cold, the buildings functional but uninviting, and everywhere you look, people are moving with purpose but without joy. In the middle of this grey world sits an abandoned amusement park, a relic from happier times that now stands as a monument to forgotten dreams and childhood wonder. Its rusted rides and peeling paint serve as a physical manifestation of what happens when society moves on from joy and play, when the practical concerns of adulthood override the importance of wonder and imagination. The park's Ferris wheel looms over the landscape like a ghost, a reminder of what once was and what might still be possible if only someone believed enough to make it turn again. The contrast between the abandoned park and the functioning neighbourhood around it creates a visual metaphor that runs through the entire story. The park represents everything that society has left behind in its rush toward productivity and success, while the grey streets and buildings represent the acceptable path, the normal life that everyone is expected to want and pursue. Between these two worlds, our characters will have to choose who they want to be. The school environment deserves special attention because it's where much of the social pressure originates. Suwon High School is depicted as a place where students are ranked by their test scores, where your value as a person is determined by your academic standing, and where the only acceptable goal is admission to a prestigious university. Teachers aren't shown as mentors or guides, but as authority figures who reinforce the system. Classmates aren't friends, but competitors in a zero-sum game where someone else's success means your failure. This educational pressure cooker is not an exaggeration for dramatic effect. It reflects the real conditions of South Korean education, where students routinely study late into the night, where private tutoring is almost mandatory for those who can afford it, and where the college entrance exam can determine the entire trajectory of your life. Il-kwon doesn't shy away from showing how this system affects young people, crushing them under expectations they never asked for and goals they never chose. The economic stratification is equally important to the world building. We see characters who live in spacious apartments with doting parents and characters who sleep in tiny rooms without heat or reliable electricity. We see students who can afford expensive tutoring and students who work multiple part-time jobs just to eat. This economic divide isn't just background detail. It's fundamental to understanding the characters' motivations and choices. Money, or the lack of it, determines what dreams are possible and which ones must be abandoned before they even have a chance to take root. Time in Annarasumanara moves at an interesting pace. School days drag on with monotonous regularity, each one blending into the next in a grey blur of classes and studying. But when magic enters the picture, time becomes fluid and dreamlike. Moments stretch out, filled with possibility and wonder. The manhwa uses this temporal contrast to emphasize how magic, whether real or imagined, changes our experience of life itself. When you're trapped in routine, days disappear without leaving any impression. But when you're experiencing something magical, even a single moment can feel eternal. The weather in Annarasumanara often mirrors the emotional state of the narrative. Most of the story takes place under cloudy skies or at night, with darkness pressing in from all sides. Rain appears frequently, not the gentle rain of romance, but the cold, uncomfortable rain that soaks through cheap clothes and reminds you of everything you don't have. Snow appears at crucial moments, transforming the familiar world into something strange and new, covering the grey streets with white that makes everything clean and possible again, if only temporarily. Sound is used deliberately throughout the manhwa, even though as readers we cannot literally hear it. The title itself, Annarasumanara, is a magic word, similar to abracadabra in English. When this word appears on the page, often in large decorative lettering, it creates a sense of incantation, of words that might actually have power if spoken with enough belief. The magician's question, "Do you believe in magic?" echoes through the story like a refrain, becoming more significant each time it's asked. The social atmosphere is perhaps the most oppressive element of the world. Everyone watches everyone else, judging, gossiping, and enforcing conformity through social pressure. Characters who step out of line face immediate consequences, not through formal punishment but through whispers, rumors, and social isolation. The community claims to value education and success, but what it really values is obedience and maintaining the status quo. Anyone different, whether through poverty or eccentricity or simply having different dreams, becomes a target. This is the world into which our story begins, a world that desperately needs magic but has convinced itself that magic doesn't exist. It's a world where dreams are considered childish and impractical, where growing up means giving up everything that makes life worth living, and where the most radical act imaginable is to believe that things could be different. Into this grey, crushing, dream-killing world walks a girl who has lost everything, a boy who has everything but himself, and a magician who insists that magic is real if only you believe in it. Chapter 2, Yoon Ah-ee, the girl who lost her dreams. At the centre of Annarasumanara is Yoon Ah-ee, and to understand this story we must first understand her. When we meet Ah-ee, she is 17 years old and living a life that no teenager should have to endure. She is not the typical manhwa protagonist, filled with determination and fighting spirit. Instead, she is worn down, exhausted, and operating on a kind of grim survival instinct that has replaced anything resembling hope or joy. Ah-ee's backstory is painted in broad, painful strokes. Years ago, when she was still young enough to believe in magic, her mother abandoned the family without explanation. This wasn't a dramatic departure preceded by arguments or warnings. One day her mother was there, and the next day she wasn't, leaving only absence and unanswered questions. The manhwa never fully explains why her mother left, and this uncertainty hangs over Ah-ee like a ghost, making it impossible for her to ever fully trust that anyone will stay. Her father, unable to cope with the responsibility or perhaps simply unlucky in business, accumulated massive debts. Instead of facing his creditors or finding a solution, he did what Ah-ee's mother had done. He disappeared, leaving his two daughters alone with nothing but the debt and the shame that comes with it. Ah-ee, barely old enough to work legally, suddenly found herself responsible not only for her own survival, but for her younger sisters as well. The weight of this responsibility transformed Ah-ee from a child into something else, something harder and more desperate. She took on multiple part-time jobs, working at convenience stores, restaurants, anywhere that would pay her enough to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. She continued attending school because education seemed like the only possible escape route, the only way to eventually earn enough money to provide real stability. But school was no longer about learning or growing as a person. It was purely transactional, a means to an end, another box to check on the endless list of things she had to do just to survive. Her daily routine was crushing in its relentlessness. She would wake up in the tiny, poorly heated room she shared with her sister, often skipping breakfast because there wasn't enough food or time. She'd rush to school, trying to stay awake through classes despite having worked late the night before. During lunch, while other students ate and socialized, she might catch a few minutes of sleep or review notes, desperately trying to maintain the grades that might someday lead to a scholarship or job opportunity. After school, she'd rush to her part-time job, often not finishing until late at night. Then home to check on her sister, maybe heat up some ramen if they had any, and collapse into a few hours of sleep before starting the cycle again. The manhwa shows us the physical toll of this existence through subtle artistic choices. Ah-ee's school uniform is worn and faded compared to her classmates. Her socks have holes in them, a detail that becomes significant later. She is thinner than she should be, her face drawn with exhaustion that makeup can't hide. Her hair is pulled back simply because she doesn't have time or energy for anything more elaborate. While other students carry expensive bags and the latest phones, Ah-ee carries only the bare essentials in a cheap backpack. But the physical hardship is only part of Ah-ee's burden. The social isolation might be even worse. At school, she exists in a strange liminal space. She's smart enough to be near the top of her class, which should earn respect, but everyone knows about her family situation. They know she's poor, that her parents abandoned her, that she works in a convenience store where they might see her. This knowledge creates a barrier between Ah-ee and her classmates. Some pity her, which she finds humiliating. Others look down on her, using her poverty to feel better about themselves. A few try to take advantage of her vulnerable position, assuming she'll be grateful for any attention or that her desperation makes her an easy target. Ah-ee responds to this isolation by building walls around herself. She doesn't make friends because friends require time and emotional energy she doesn't have. She doesn't join clubs or attend social events. She doesn't allow herself to hope for things that normal teenagers hope for, like romance or fun or any kind of future that isn't just about survival. She has learned that hoping leads to disappointment, that dreaming leads to heartbreak, and that the only way to protect yourself is to expect nothing and want nothing beyond the basic necessities of existence. Her relationship with her younger sister adds another layer of complexity to Ah-ee's character. She loves her sister fiercely and works herself to exhaustion to provide for her. But this responsibility also breeds resentment that Ah-ee feels guilty about but cannot entirely suppress. Why should she have to be the parent? Why should she sacrifice her youth to take care of someone else? These thoughts make her feel like a terrible person, which only adds to her emotional burden. She can't even complain about her situation, because doing so would mean admitting she resents her sister, and that admission feels unforgivable. The manhwa gives us glimpses of who Ah-ee used to be through brief flashbacks and references. As a young child, she believed in magic. She wanted to be a magician when she grew up, performing tricks and bringing wonder to people's lives. She had dreams that extended beyond mere survival, dreams about creating beauty and joy, but those dreams belonged to a different person, a child who ceased to exist the day her mother left. Current Ah-ee looks back on her childhood self with something like contempt. That little girl was naive and foolish, believing in impossible things instead of preparing for the harsh realities of life. Growing up in Ah-ee's understanding means killing that dreaming child and becoming someone practical, someone who understands that magic isn't real and that survival is the only goal that matters. This philosophy, dark as it is, has kept Ah-ee functioning. It's her armor against a world that has hurt her repeatedly. By expecting nothing good, she can't be disappointed. By wanting only to become an adult with a stable job and income, she has a clear, achievable goal that doesn't require magic or miracles. She has convinced herself that once she's an adult, everything will be better. Adults have money, control over their lives, and the power to protect themselves from being hurt. Childhood, from her current perspective, was nothing but vulnerability and pain, and the faster she can leave it behind, the better. Her academic performance is simultaneously a source of pride and another weight on her shoulders. Ah-ee is consistently ranked near the top of her class, second only to Na Il-deung, who will become important to our story later. These grades are her ticket to a better life, but maintaining them requires constant effort on top of everything else she has to do. She can't afford tutoring like her wealthier classmates, so she has to be twice as smart and work twice as hard to keep up. Every test is a battle, every assignment another hurdle, and the pressure never lets up, because slipping even a little might mean losing her chance at a scholarship or good university placement. Teachers treat Ah-ee with a mixture of pity and utilitarian satisfaction. They hold her up as an example to other students. Look how hard she works despite her circumstances. Why can't you do the same? This performative praise makes Ah-ee feel like a trained animal doing tricks for treats. But she endures it because maintaining the teacher's goodwill might be useful. She has learned to swallow her pride, to smile when she wants to scream, to say thank you when she feels humiliated, because that's what survival requires. The convenience store where Ah-ee works deserves special attention because it's where several crucial events occur. The owner, Kim Do-sik, initially seems like a reasonable employer, someone giving a hard-working girl a chance. But as the story progresses, his true nature emerges. He uses Ah-ee's desperate situation against her, making inappropriate advances and creating a hostile work environment, counting on her poverty and lack of options to keep her silent and compliant. This storyline, though disturbing, reflects a reality faced by many young women in vulnerable positions, and the manhwa doesn't shy away from showing how predatory behavior disguises itself as kindness. Ah-ee's relationship with money is complicated and painful. Every won she earns is already spent before she receives it, allocated for rent, food, utilities, school expenses. She never has extra for anything that might bring joy or comfort. When she sees other students buying snacks or new clothes, she doesn't feel simple envy. She feels anger at the unfairness of a world where some people have so much while she has nothing through no fault of her own. She feels shame that she even wants these things when she should just be grateful to have food and shelter. These conflicting emotions create a constant internal turmoil that exhausts her as much as the physical labor. The manhwa also shows us Ah-ee's complete lack of self-care. She doesn't take time to rest or do things she enjoys because she's convinced herself these things are luxuries she can't afford. When she's sick, she works through it. When she's tired, she pushes harder. She treats her body as a tool to be used, not a part of herself deserving care and kindness. This self-neglect extends to her emotional life as well. She doesn't allow herself to feel sad about her situation, because sadness seems self-indulgent when there's work to be done. She doesn't let herself feel angry because anger requires energy better spent on survival. She has locked away her emotions so tightly that she's not entirely sure what she feels about anything anymore. Her perception of adults is deeply cynical. Adults, in Ah-ee's experience, are people who abandon their children, who prey on vulnerable teenagers, who maintain systems that benefit themselves at others' expense. Yet paradoxically, she desperately wants to become an adult because she believes adulthood equals power and security. She doesn't realize that she's already been forced to be an adult in all the ways that matter, taking on responsibilities that should never fall on someone so young. The adulthood she dreams of is a fantasy, a magical state where all her problems will disappear, which is ironic given her insistence that magic doesn't exist. Ah-ee's style of dress and presentation reflects her internal state. She makes herself as invisible as possible, never drawing attention, never standing out. Her uniform is always properly worn, not because she cares about following rules, but because breaking them would invite scrutiny. She doesn't wear makeup or accessories. She keeps her head down, makes herself small, hoping that if she's quiet and unremarkable enough, maybe life will stop hurting her for a while. The manhwa gives us several moments where we see cracks in Ah-ee's armor, brief instances where her carefully constructed defenses fail, and we glimpse the frightened, lonely child underneath. These moments are heartbreaking precisely because Ah-ee tries so hard to hide them, angry at herself for weakness, terrified that showing vulnerability will invite more pain. She has become so good at pretending to be fine that she's almost forgotten it's a pretense. This is who Yoon Ah-ee is when our story begins, a girl who has given up on dreams, who has convinced herself that magic is childish nonsense, who measures her entire worth by her ability to survive one more day. She is trapped in a grey existence that is slowly crushing her, moving toward an adulthood that she hopes will save her, but which will likely just offer different versions of the same struggle. She has forgotten how to hope, how to dream, how to imagine a life that contains anything beyond mere survival. She has forgotten, in other words, how to be a child, how to believe in magic. And it's precisely when someone is most lost, most convinced that wonder is impossible, that magic tends to appear. Chapter 3, The Magician, Lee Eul's Introduction and Mystery. On a day that seems like any other in Ah-ee's grey existence, something impossible happens. While walking home from one of her many jobs, exhausted and thinking about nothing but sleep, Ah-ee encounters a man who will change everything. Money that she desperately needs, money she earned through hours of labour, suddenly lifts from her hand and floats away on an impossible breeze, defying gravity and reason. She chases this flying money through streets and alleys until it leads her to a place she's heard about but never visited, the abandoned amusement park that sits on the edge of her neighbourhood like a monument to forgotten joy. There, standing in the shadow of the dormant Ferris wheel, is a man who introduces himself simply as Lee Eul. He is dressed like a magician from a storybook, complete with a tall black top hat, a long black coat, and white gloves. His appearance is so theatrical, so out of place in the modern grey world that he seems almost like an illustration come to life. He holds Ah-ee's money in his hand and asks her a question that will echo through the rest of her life. Do you believe in magic? Lee Eul is deliberately presented as a mystery. The manhwa introduces him not through backstory or explanation, but through presence and action. He performs magic tricks, genuinely impressive illusions that seem to defy explanation. He speaks in riddles and metaphors, answering questions with questions, never giving a straight response about who he is or where he came from. His age is ambiguous. Sometimes he seems young, with a childlike enthusiasm and joy. Other times there's a weariness in his eyes that suggests he's older than he appears, carrying sorrows that have aged him in ways that go beyond years. The magician lives in the abandoned amusement park, making his home among the rusted rides and peeling paint. This choice of residence is significant. While everyone else in the city lives in proper apartments and houses, participating in normal society, Lee Eul has removed himself from that world entirely. the park becomes his kingdom. A place where different rules apply, where magic might still be possible because normal logic has been abandoned along with the rides and concession stands. His living conditions are barely more comfortable than Ah-ee's. He has no running water, no reliable electricity, no heat in winter. He sleeps in what used to be the park's management office, surrounded by old posters advertising fun and excitement that the park can no longer provide. Yet Lee Eul doesn't seem to suffer from his circumstances the way Ah-ee suffers from hers. Where she is weighed down by poverty and responsibility, he seems somehow free, liberated from conventional concerns about comfort or security. Lee Eul shares his space with a parrot named Min-yeo, which means beauty in Korean. This bird is not a normal pet. It talks, though whether its words are trained responses or something more is left deliberately ambiguous. Min-yeo often says things that seem too perfectly timed, too relevant to the current situation, to be coincidence. The bird becomes a kind of Greek chorus, commenting on events and sometimes expressing truths that Lee Eul himself won't speak directly. The magician's daily routine, insofar as he has one, revolves entirely around magic. He practices constantly, perfecting illusions and inventing new ones. He performs for no one, or perhaps for himself, or perhaps for the spirits of all the children who once filled this park with laughter. When visitors stumble into his domain, he performs for them with the same dedication he would give to a packed audience, because in Lee Eul's world, magic demands respect and commitment regardless of who's watching. His philosophy about magic is central to understanding his character. For Lee Eul, magic is not merely entertainment or clever trickery. It's a way of seeing the world, a refusal to accept that life must be only what it appears to be on the surface. When he asks people if they believe in magic, he's not asking if they think he can actually violate the laws of physics. He's asking something deeper. Do you believe that wonder is possible? Do you believe that life can contain mystery and beauty? Do you believe that the world is more than just a series of practical problems to be solved? The manhwa keeps us uncertain about whether Lee Eul's magic is real in a supernatural sense, or if he's simply an extraordinarily skilled illusionist. We see him perform tricks that seem to have no rational explanation. We see him appear and disappear in ways that shouldn't be possible. We see events occur in his presence that cannot be easily explained by conventional means. Yet the story always leaves room for doubt, never confirming or denying the literal reality of his magic. This ambiguity is intentional and important. The question is not whether magic is objectively real, but whether believing in it changes how we experience life. Lee Eul's personality is childlike in the best and most complicated sense of that word. He experiences wonder easily, delighting in simple things that adults have learned to ignore. He speaks honestly, not because he lacks the intelligence to lie, but because he's rejected the social conventions that make lying necessary. He plays and creates for their own sake, not for recognition or reward. He doesn't worry about the future or dwell on the past, living almost entirely in the present moment. But this childlike quality is not the same as being childish or immature. Lee Eul demonstrates remarkable perceptiveness about people's emotions and motivations. He sees through social masks and pretenses, recognizing pain and longing that others work hard to hide. His interactions with Ah-ee show a deep emotional intelligence, an ability to understand what she needs, even when she doesn't understand it herself. He's gentle with her trauma while still challenging the defensive walls she's built around herself. The contrast between Lee Eul and the other adults in the story is stark and deliberate. While teachers and parents are shown enforcing conformity and crushing individuality, Lee Eul nurtures uniqueness and creativity. While employers exploit and abuse young people, Lee Eul offers kindness without expecting anything in return. While society insists that growing up means abandoning dreams, Lee Eul demonstrates that holding on to wonder and imagination is not only possible, but necessary for a life worth living. His relationship with Ah-ee develops gradually and carefully. At first, she's frightened and suspicious of him, which is a reasonable response given her experiences with adult men. He has stolen her money, even if he returns it in a magical way. He lives in an abandoned park, which the rumors say is haunted. He dresses strangely and speaks in riddles. Everything about him should set off alarm bells for a young woman who's learned to be cautious. But Lee Eul never pushes, never demands, never makes Ah-ee feel unsafe. He offers her magic lessons, not as a favor she owes him for, but as a gift freely given. He creates a space where she can be curious and ask questions without judgment. He sees past her exhaustion and defensive cynicism to the child who once dreamed of being a magician, and he addresses that child directly, inviting her to wake up and dream again. His teaching method is unconventional. He doesn't simply show Ah-ee how to perform tricks, though he does that too. Instead, he tries to teach her how to see the world differently, how to notice the magic that exists in ordinary moments if you have eyes trained to see it. A snowflake landing on your hand, the way light catches on water, the unexpected kindness of a stranger. These aren't magic tricks, but they are magic. The real magic that makes life bearable and beautiful. The community's reaction to Lee Eul reveals much about how society treats anyone who refuses to conform. Rumors spread about him. He's crazy, he's dangerous, he's a criminal, he's done terrible things. These rumors persist despite no one actually knowing anything concrete about him. His mere existence as someone different, someone who has rejected normal adult life, makes people uncomfortable. They need him to be dangerous because if he's not, if he's actually happy living the way he does, it raises uncomfortable questions about the lives they've chosen. Some people are drawn to him despite or because of his strangeness. Children in particular seem to recognize something in Lee Eul that adults have forgotten. They're less afraid of him, more willing to accept his magic at face value, more open to the possibility that this strange man in the abandoned park might actually be offering something valuable. This connection with children isn't predatory or inappropriate. It's simply that children and Lee Eul speak a common language of wonder that adults have unlearned. As the story progresses, we begin to see hints that Lee Eul's cheerful exterior might be hiding deeper pain. Occasionally, his smile seems strained. Sometimes, when he thinks no one is watching, a profound sadness crosses his face. He makes oblique references to a past he doesn't want to discuss, to reasons he can't or won't return to normal life. These moments suggest that Lee Eul's choice to live as he does isn't purely positive, that he's not simply a free spirit floating above worldly concerns. He's running from something, hiding from something, protecting himself from something, and the abandoned amusement park is his refuge as much as it is Ah-ee's. The magic words Annarasumanara that appear throughout the manhwa are particularly associated with Lee Eul. When he speaks them, they're printed in large decorative letters that dominate the page, transforming the simple comic panels into something more mystical. These words become a kind of incantation, a key that opens doors between the mundane world and the world of possibility. They represent the power of language to transform reality, or at least our experience of reality, which might amount to the same thing. Lee Eul's most radical act is his refusal to grow up in the way society demands. He doesn't have a career or ambitions in the conventional sense. He doesn't own property or accumulate wealth. He doesn't maintain a respectable appearance or concern himself with what others think. In a world that measures worth by productivity and status, Lee Eul has removed himself from the measurement system entirely. This makes him either completely free or completely lost depending on your perspective, and the manhwa never definitively chooses between these interpretations. His costume is worth examining as well. The magician's outfit, black coat, top hat, and white gloves is deliberately old-fashioned, calling back to a different era of magic before television and the internet made wonder more difficult to achieve. By dressing this way, Lee Eul is making a statement. He belongs to a different time, or perhaps outside of time entirely. He's rejected modernity not out of ignorance, but out of a deep understanding that modern life has lost something essential that must be recovered. The way Lee Eul moves through space is also distinctive. He appears and disappears with surprising suddenness, always seeming to be exactly where he needs to be at precisely the right moment. This could be masterful timing and an understanding of people's patterns. It could be actual magic. The manhwa doesn't clarify, leaving us suspended in the same uncertainty that the characters experience. What matters is not the mechanism, but the effect. Lee Eul exists slightly outside the normal flow of reality, operating according to different rules than everyone around him. His question, "Do you believe in magic?" is not asked once and forgotten. He asks it repeatedly to different people in different circumstances, and each time the question carries different weight and meaning. To Ah-ee, worn down by poverty and responsibility, it's an invitation to remember who she once was. To Na Il-deung, trapped by expectations and pressure, it's a challenge to imagine a life beyond the narrow path laid out for him. To adults who have long since stopped dreaming, it's an accusation, a reminder of everything they've lost and given up. Lee Eul represents possibility in its purest form. He is what life looks like when you refuse to accept limitations, when you insist that wonder and beauty matter more than security and status, when you choose magic over practicality. Whether this makes him wise or foolish, healthy or sick, admirable or pitiable, the manhwa deliberately leaves open for interpretation. He is a mirror in which each character and each reader sees something different, revealing more about the observer than about Lee Eul himself. And so the magician stands in his abandoned park, asking his question, performing his tricks, living his impossible life, waiting for someone to truly believe. In Yoon Ah-ee, he may have finally found what he's been looking for, though neither of them knows it yet. The girl who has given up on dreams and the man who has refused to grow up are about to embark on a journey that will transform them both in ways neither can predict. Chapter 4. Na Il-deung, the boy forced to dream. While Ah-ee struggles with too little, Na Il-deung suffers from too much. He is the third point in the triangle of characters that forms the heart of Annarasumanara, and his story provides a crucial counterpoint to Ah-ee's. Where she has been abandoned by her parents and left to fend for herself, Il-deung has parents who are obsessively involved in every aspect of his life. Where she works multiple jobs just to survive, he wants for nothing materially. Where she dreams of becoming an adult so she can escape her misery, he's already been turned into a miniature adult shaped and moulded according to his family's ambitions. Il-dong is the top student at Sewoon High School, holding the #1 rank that everyone else is fighting to achieve. His name itself reflects his status. Il-deung means first place in Korean. His parents didn't give him this name by accident. They chose it deliberately, programming their expectations into his identity from birth, making it impossible for him to imagine being anything other than first, best, most successful. His family background is the opposite of Ah-ee's. His father is a prosecutor, a position of significant power and prestige in Korean society. His mother is presumably well-educated and dedicated to her children's success. He has siblings who have also achieved according to the family's standards. They live in a spacious, well-appointed apartment. Il-deung has his own room, access to the best tutors, expensive supplementary study materials, and every advantage that money and connections can provide. But all of this comes with strings attached. Il-deung's life is not his own. It belongs to his family's ambitions, to his father's expectations, to a future that has been planned out in detail without anyone asking what he actually wants. Every moment of his day is scheduled and purposeful. Wake up at a specific time. Study before school. Attend classes and maintain perfect attention. Stay after for additional study sessions. Come home to more studying, with breaks only for carefully planned meals and the minimum sleep necessary to function. The manhwa shows us Il-kyung's existence through visual motifs that emphasize his imprisonment. He's often drawn behind lines, bars, or geometric patterns that cage him in. His posture is rigid and perfect, the posture of someone who's learned that even relaxing might be seen as slacking off. His school uniform is immaculate. Every button fastened, every crease sharp, because anything less than perfection might reflect poorly on his family. He's like a machine that's been programmed for academic success, functioning exactly as designed but never questioning whether this is how he wants to function. His relationship with his classmates is complicated by his status. As the #1 student, he should be respected and admired, and in a surface way, he is. Teachers praise him constantly. Other students acknowledge his intelligence, but there's no warmth in these interactions, no genuine connection. Il-kyung is not a person to his classmates, but a standard against which they measure their own inadequacy. They resent him for being better than them while simultaneously accepting that his superiority is natural and deserved. Il-kyung doesn't have friends in any meaningful sense. How could he? Friendship requires time, emotional availability, and a willingness to be vulnerable, none of which Il-kyung can afford. His peers are competitors in the brutal zero-sum game of academic ranking. Showing weakness to them, sharing problems or doubts, would be strategic suicide. So he remains isolated, maintaining the perfect facade of the model student while suffocating behind the mask. His internal life is a mystery to everyone around him, and initially to the reader as well. Il-kyung has learned to show nothing, to express only what's appropriate and expected. He smiles when he wins awards. He looks serious and focused during classes. He nods respectfully when teachers praise him. But what does he actually feel? What does he want? What dreams might he harbour that have nothing to do with test scores and university rankings? These questions don't seem to occur to anyone because Il-kyung has become so good at performing his assigned role that people have forgotten he might be anything other than what he appears. The pressure he lives under is not the dramatic, violent pressure of physical abuse or obvious cruelty. It's more insidious than that. It's the pressure of expectations so high they're barely achievable, of love that's conditional on continued success, of an identity built entirely around achievements rather than inherent worth. His parents probably believe they're doing what's best for him, giving him every advantage, pushing him to realize his full potential. They don't see, or choose not to see, that they're crushing him. Il-kyung's awareness of this situation develops gradually. Initially, he seems to have internalized his family's values completely. Being first is what matters. Academic success is the most important goal. Everything else, emotions, desires, individuality, is secondary to maintaining his status. He studies not because he loves learning, but because studying is what he does, it's who he is, and the alternative is unthinkable. But cracks appear in this facade. Small moments where Il-kyung's programming falters and something more authentic breaks through. A lingering glance at students laughing together. A moment of hesitation before answering a teacher's question, not because he doesn't know the answer, but because he's wondering why the answer matters. Brief instances where his carefully controlled expression slips and we see confusion, doubt, or something that might be despair. His awareness of Ah-ee marks a turning point. She's the only person who comes close to his academic performance, consistently ranking second to his first. But unlike him, she's not surrounded by support systems and advantages. She achieves what she achieves through sheer determination while working multiple jobs and dealing with circumstances that would destroy most people. Il-kyung finds himself drawn to her not out of romantic interest initially, though that develops later, but out of a kind of fascinated confusion. How does she do it? How does Ah-ee maintain her grades while working and dealing with poverty and family abandonment? More importantly, why does she do it? Il-kyun studies because he has no choice, because his entire identity and family approval depend on it. But what drives Ah-ee? Her motivation comes from within, from genuine desire to escape her circumstances, not from external pressure to meet someone else's expectations. This difference fascinates Il-kyun and makes him start to question his own life. He begins observing Ah-ee not in a creepy stalker way, but with genuine curiosity. He notices things others miss: the worn quality of her clothes, the exhaustion she tries to hide, the way she spaces out sometimes like she's not really present in her body. He sees her working at the convenience store when he stops in, and the sight disturbs something in him. While he's been handed everything, she's fighting for every scrap, yet she seems, in some indefinable way, more real than he is, more alive despite her suffering. When Il-kyun discovers that Ah-ee is visiting the abandoned amusement park and spending time with the mysterious magician, his curiosity intensifies. The rumors about Lee Eul portray him as dangerous, possibly insane, someone to be avoided. The rational, logical part of Il-kyun that has been so carefully cultivated knows he should stay away, that nothing good can come from involving himself with such a person. But another part of him, a part that has been suppressed for so long he'd almost forgotten its existence, is desperately curious. He begins following Ah-ee to the park, hiding and watching her magic lessons with Lee Eul. What he sees both frightens and attracts him. Here is a world operating according to completely different rules than the one he knows. Lee Eul isn't teaching Ah-ee how to succeed in the conventional sense. He's teaching her how to dream, how to believe in impossible things, how to find joy in the moment rather than always planning for the future. This is everything Il-kyun has been told to reject as childish and impractical. Yet he can't look away. The more he watches, the more he sees Ah-ee changing. She starts smiling occasionally. She seems less burdened, as if the magic lessons are giving her something she desperately needed. And Il-kyun realizes he needs it too, though he can't articulate what it is. He needs permission to be something other than perfect. He needs someone to tell him that his worth isn't measured by his test scores. He needs magic, though he's not sure he believes in it. Eventually, his hiding is discovered. Both Ah-ee and Lee Eul know he's been watching, though they handle this knowledge differently. Lee Eul seems amused and unsurprised, as if he'd known all along and was simply waiting for Il-kyun to reveal himself. Ah-ee is more wary, protective of the magical space she's found, and uncertain whether Il-kyun's presence will contaminate it with the competitive, judgmental energy of school. But Lee Eul invites Il-kyun to join them, asking him the same question he asked Ah-ee. Do you believe in magic? For Il-kyun, this question is even more challenging than it was for Ah-ee. She at least had childhood memories of believing, dreams she'd temporarily forgotten. Il-kyun has never been allowed to believe in anything that couldn't be proven, measured, or tested. Magic is irrational, unscientific, useless. Everything he's been taught says he should dismiss the question and walk away. Instead, he stays. He stays because something in him recognizes that this ridiculous magician in his abandoned park might be offering the one thing Il-kyun has never had: freedom. Freedom from expectations, from pressure, from the need to be perfect. Freedom to be foolish and curious and childlike. Freedom to discover who he might be if he stopped trying to be what everyone else wanted. Il-kyun's journey is different from Ah-ee's, but equally important. She needs to rediscover dreams she's lost. He needs to discover what it means to have dreams in the first place, to want something for himself, rather than accepting goals handed down from others. She needs to believe life can be more than mere survival. He needs to believe life can be more than mere achievement. The contrast between Il-kyun and Lee Eul is eventually revealed to be more complex than it initially appears. As we'll learn later in the story, Lee Eul was once very much like Il-kyun. Top student, parental pressure, trapped in a life of achievement and expectation. Lee Eul's past will serve as a warning of what can happen when that pressure becomes too much, when the facade finally cracks and the person underneath can't handle the revelation of how empty their successful life has been. But we're not there yet. For now, Il is at the beginning of his transformation. He's starting to question everything he's taken for granted. He's beginning to see that being first place might not be worth the cost he's paying. He's developing feelings for Ah-ee that have nothing to do with academic competition and everything to do with recognizing a kindred spirit who understands suffering even if their suffering comes from opposite circumstances. He's also starting to change in small but significant ways. He smiles more, though he tries to hide it. He performs less perfectly in class sometimes, not because he doesn't know the material, but because he's deliberately holding back, testing whether the sky will fall if he's not absolutely perfect every single time. He talks back to his parents occasionally, tiny rebellions that would seem insignificant to anyone else, but represent monumental shifts for someone who's been trained from birth to be compliant and obedient. The manhwa draws Il differently as he begins to change. The rigid geometric qualities of his character design soften slightly. His posture becomes less perfect. His expressions, previously limited to a small range of socially acceptable emotions, become more varied and authentic. It's as if learning magic from Lee Eul and spending time with Ah-ee is allowing him to become three-dimensional, to exist as a full person rather than a two-dimensional cutout of the perfect student. His relationship with his parents becomes more fraught as he changes. They notice something is different, that their carefully programmed son is malfunctioning somehow. They increase the pressure, attempting to correct whatever has gone wrong. But their tactics, which worked when Il was younger and more compliant, are starting to fail. He's tasted freedom, or at least the promise of freedom, and it's become impossible to forget that taste and return to his previous existence. Na-il represents everyone who has lived up to others' expectations while losing themselves in the process. He embodies the particular cruelty of success that costs you your identity, of achieving everything society says you should want while discovering that those achievements mean nothing if they're not truly yours. His journey is about reclaiming himself from the people who shaped him, about learning that it's okay to be less than perfect, to want things that don't make sense, to believe in magic even when it seems ridiculous. By the time we reach the middle of the story, Il has become a bridge between Ah-ee's world and Lee Eul's, between the harsh reality of survival and academic pressure and the dreamlike possibility of the abandoned amusement park. He brings resources and capabilities that Ah-ee lacks due to his privilege. He brings a different perspective on success and its costs. And most importantly, he brings a desperate need to discover who he actually is beneath all the layers of expectation and programming. Together, these three characters, the girl who wants to grow up too fast, the man who refuses to grow up at all, and the boy who's been forced to be an adult before he could be a child, form a complete picture of what's wrong with a society that values achievement over humanity and practicality over wonder. Their interactions, conflicts, and eventual understanding of each other form the emotional heart of Annarasumanara's story. Chapter 5. The Abandoned Amusement Park, a Refuge for Lost Souls. The abandoned amusement park is not merely a setting in Annarasumanara. It's a character in its own right, a space with its own history, symbolism, and emotional resonance that shapes everything that happens within its rusted gates. Understanding the park is essential to understanding the story, because the park is where reality and magic blur, where the impossible becomes possible, and where people can briefly escape the crushing weight of the ordinary world. The park's history is never fully explained, but we can piece together fragments from visual details and brief references. Once this was a place of joy and laughter, where families came to ride the Ferris wheel and roller coaster, to eat cotton candy and win prizes at carnival games. Children ran through these paths screaming with delight rather than fear. The bright lights, cheerful music, and sounds of happiness filled the space from opening until closing. It was everything an amusement park should be. A temporary escape from everyday life, a place where magic seemed real even to adults who knew better. But something happened. Economic downturn, competition from newer facilities, perhaps an accident or scandal that drove customers away, and the park closed. The owners abandoned it rather than paying for proper decommission and demolition, leaving it to decay slowly into the ruin we see in the story. The rides still stand but no longer move. The paths remain but are cracked and overgrown with weeds. The buildings slowly crumble, paint peeling away to reveal rotting wood and rusting metal beneath. This decay is rendered in gorgeous, haunting detail throughout the manhwa. Il-kwon's artwork captures the particular melancholy of abandoned entertainment venues, places designed for joy that have been left to die. There's something especially sad about amusement park ruins because they represent not just physical decay, but the death of happiness, the abandonment of fun and play in favour of whatever proved more profitable or practical. The Ferris wheel dominates the park's visual landscape, its large wheel frozen in place, gondolas hanging empty and swaying slightly in the wind. The Ferris wheel is significant because it represents perspective, the ability to rise above your everyday life and see things from a different vantage point. Throughout the story, Lee Eul's magic sometimes involves the Ferris wheel moving despite being disconnected from any power source, or at least seeming to move in ways that might be clever illusions or might be something more. These moments are always transformative for whoever experiences them, offering a literal and metaphorical elevation above their problems. The carousel, that other iconic amusement park ride, appears in several scenes. Its painted horses are chipped and faded, frozen mid-gallop, going nowhere. The carousel represents childhood itself, going in circles, simple and joyful and ultimately going nowhere. But that's not the point. The point is the experience of riding, of pretending your painted horse is real, of letting yourself be carried along by motion and music. The carousel's stillness in the abandoned park represents childhood dreams that have been stopped, frozen before they could complete their journey. The park's administrative buildings, where Lee Eul makes his home, show different layers of occupancy and abandonment. The original furniture and decorations from when the park operated are still present but covered in dust and damaged by weather. Lee Eul's belongings, his magic props, his few possessions are scattered among these ruins, new life trying to grow in dead soil. The juxtaposition creates a strange doubled vision. You see both what the space was and what it's become, and somehow both versions exist simultaneously. Weather affects the park powerfully. On sunny days, which are rare in this story, the light filtering through tree branches and broken roof panels creates a dappled, dreamlike quality. The ruins look almost beautiful, romantic in their decay, but more commonly we see the park in rain or twilight or darkness, when it becomes genuinely creepy, the kind of place urban legends warn you away from. The shadows are deep and full of undefined movement. Sounds echo strangely in the empty spaces. It's easy to understand why the neighborhood kids tell ghost stories about this place. Yet despite its creepiness, the park serves as a sanctuary. It's the one place in the story where the normal rules don't apply, where society's expectations can't reach, where you can experiment with being different without immediate consequences. When Ah-ee and Il-kwon enter the park, they leave behind their identities as struggling poor girl and perfect student. Inside the gates, they can just be Ah-ee and Il-kwon, people learning magic from a mysterious teacher, allowed to be curious and playful and uncertain without judgment. The park's abandonment creates a space outside of normal society, neither fully part of the adult world of responsibility and work, nor the childhood world of school and family. It exists in a liminal state between these worlds, which makes it perfect for characters who are themselves caught between childhood and adulthood, trying to figure out who they want to become. The park has refused to move forward into redevelopment and refuses to disappear entirely. It simply exists, stubbornly present, waiting for someone who needs it. Lee Eul's relationship with the park is symbiotic. He needs it as much as it needs him. Without the park, he would be just another homeless person, vulnerable to authorities and social services that would try to force him back into normal society. The park provides shelter and a stage for his magic. In return, his presence keeps the park alive in some essential way. He cares for it, cleaning certain areas, maintaining the paths he uses regularly, treating it with respect rather than exploiting it for shelter and then moving on. He's not squatting in the park so much as coexisting with it, finding harmony with a space that's as outside normal life as he is. The park also functions as a testing ground. The characters who visit must overcome their fear of the creepy abandoned space, must be brave enough or desperate enough to ignore the rumors and social prohibitions against coming here. This acts as a natural filter. People who are too invested in social norms, too concerned with what others think, will never set foot in the park. Only those who are already questioning, already different, already looking for something beyond the ordinary, will take that step through the gates. Throughout Annarasumanara, the park undergoes subtle transformations that mirror the characters' emotional journeys. When Ah-ee first arrives, it's depicted as dark, threatening, and decayed. As she becomes more comfortable and begins learning magic, the same spaces seem less menacing, even beautiful in their ruin. The park isn't literally changing, but Ah-ee's perception is, and the artwork reflects this shift. What once seemed scary becomes familiar, even comforting. The seasonal changes visible in the park are also significant. We see it in different weather conditions and times of year, each bringing different qualities. The summer sequences feel heavy and still, the decay more apparent in bright sunlight. Fall brings fallen leaves that gather in corners and blow across abandoned pathways, adding to the atmosphere of melancholy, but also of natural beauty. Winter scenes, particularly those involving snow, transform the park into something almost magical, covering the rust and decay with clean white that makes everything new again, if only temporarily. Certain locations within the park take on special significance as the story progresses. The space where Lee Eul teaches magic becomes a kind of classroom, not formal or structured, but nonetheless a place of learning and transformation. The highest point accessible in the park, probably part of the Ferris wheel structure, becomes a place for important conversations and revelations, somewhere you can see the entire neighborhood spread out below and gain perspective on your life and choices. The park's fence, separating it from the normal world, appears frequently in the visual narrative. Characters are often drawn standing at this boundary, looking in or looking out, physically representing the choice they face. Stay in the normal world with all its pain and pressure, but also its security and social acceptance. Or cross into the park where magic might be possible, but you're definitively marking yourself as different, as someone who has rejected normal life. The symbolism of the amusement park extends beyond the literal space. Amusement parks are places where adults pay money to briefly feel like children again, to experience thrill and wonder and temporary escape from responsibility. By setting his story in an abandoned park, Il-kwon is suggesting that society has abandoned these needs, deciding that childlike joy and wonder aren't worth maintaining, that the resources would be better spent elsewhere. The park's decay represents culture's decay, the loss of play and imagination in favor of productivity and practical concerns. Yet the park refuses to completely die. Grass grows through cracked pavement. Birds nest in the abandoned structures. Lee Eul lives among the ruins, performing magic for anyone who will watch. Life persists even in spaces that have been abandoned and forgotten. This suggests hope, that wonder and imagination cannot be completely killed, that they will always find a way to survive even in hostile conditions, waiting for someone who needs them. The park also represents risk and danger, which is crucial to the story. Ah-ee and Il-daeung are literally breaking rules by being here, trespassing on property they shouldn't enter. They could be hurt by unstable structures or dangerous debris. They could encounter dangerous people since abandoned places tend to attract those who exist outside normal society. The fact that they choose to come anyway, that the potential for magic and freedom is worth these risks, speaks to how desperate they are for something different from their normal lives. As events progress and the outside world begins to intrude on the park, its sanctuary quality is threatened. Police and other authorities investigate. Curious locals who've heard rumors start snooping around. The barrier between the magical space of the park and the pragmatic reality outside becomes more permeable. And this permeability brings danger. The park cannot remain separate forever. Eventually, the characters will have to carry what they've learned back into the real world, or risk losing it entirely when the park is finally destroyed or Lee Eul is forced to leave. The abandoned amusement park in Annarasumanara is where lost children go to find themselves, where dreams that have nowhere else to exist can briefly flourish, and where magic, whether real or imagined, provides respite from a world that has forgotten how to play. It's a physical manifestation of the story's central themes: the importance of wonder, the cost of practicality, and the eternal human need for spaces where different rules apply and impossible things might just be possible. Chapter 6. The Magic Begins: First Encounters and Transformations. The relationship between Ah-ee and Lee Eul develops gradually through a series of magical encounters that blur the line between illusion and reality, between lesson and therapy, between teaching tricks and teaching a way of seeing the world. These early magic lessons form the emotional core of Annarasumanara's first half, showing us how belief in magic, or belief in anything beyond mere survival, can begin to heal a wounded soul. The first proper magic lesson occurs after Ah-ee's initial encounter with Lee Eul and the floating money. Despite her cynicism and exhaustion, something draws her back to the park. Maybe it's curiosity about how he performed the trick. Maybe it's the fact that Lee Eul treated her with kindness when most adults in her life treat her as either invisible or as prey. Maybe she's just desperate enough for any kind of positive interaction that even a strange magician in an abandoned park seems preferable to her normal life. Lee Eul greets her return as if he's been expecting her, as if there was never any doubt she would come back. He doesn't make a big deal of it, doesn't demand explanations, or make her feel uncomfortable about her decision. He simply asks if she's ready to learn magic, and when she gives a hesitant yes, he begins to teach. The lessons are not what Ah-ee expects. She's thinking of magic tricks as mechanical processes, sleight of hand and misdirection, that can be learned through practice. And there is some of that. Lee Eul shows her how to palm a coin, how to use misdirection, how to create illusions through careful preparation and precise execution. But he insists these techniques are not really magic, they're just tricks. Real magic, he says, is something else entirely. Real magic, according to Lee Eul, is about changing how people see the world. It's about creating moments of wonder and possibility that break through the grey routine of everyday existence. When a magician makes something disappear, the audience knows intellectually that it hasn't actually vanished, that there's a rational explanation. But for a moment, just a moment, they let themselves believe in the impossible. That moment is the real magic, not the technique that created it. This philosophy challenges everything Ah-ee has built her survival strategy around. She's spent years trying to see the world exactly as it is, refusing to hope or dream because hope and dreams hurt when they're crushed. Lee Eul is asking her to deliberately blur her vision, to choose wonder over certainty, to believe in things she knows aren't literally true. It feels dangerous, like he's asking her to remove the armor that's kept her functioning. But Lee Eul is patient. He doesn't push Ah-ee to believe anything she's not ready for. He simply performs his magic, asks his questions, and lets her come to her own conclusions at her own pace. He shows her a trick where a flower appears from nowhere, and while he could explain the mechanism, he chooses not to, letting her sit with the experience of wonder before analysing how it was done. He makes Minyo, the parrot, seem to speak with human-like intelligence and timing, and never quite confirms whether this is trained behaviour or something more mysterious. The park itself becomes part of the magic lessons. Lee Eul points out details Ah-ee has never noticed, the way light filters through the trees at certain times of day, creating natural spotlights perfect for performance. The patterns of rust on metal that look like abstract art if you view them from the right angle. The sounds the wind makes moving through broken structures, creating an eerie music that no human composed. He teaches her to see beauty in decay, magic in the ordinary, wonder in what others have dismissed as worthless. As Ah-ee learns, something shifts in her demeanour. The changes are subtle at first. She smiles slightly when Lee Eul succeeds at a particularly impressive trick. She asks questions not just about how to perform illusions, but about why magic matters, what it means to him, why he's chosen this life. She stays longer than she should, letting her part-time shifts start late because she's lost track of time in the park, too absorbed in the magic lessons to remember her normal obligations. These moments of forgetting, of being present in the moment rather than constantly worrying about the future, represent the first cracks in the defensive walls Ah-ee has built around herself. Lee Eul is giving her something she didn't know she desperately needed. Permission to be a child again. Permission to play and wonder and temporarily forget about survival. The magic lessons are really lessons in how to live rather than merely exist. Il-deung's eventual inclusion in the magic lessons adds a new dynamic. Initially, Ah-ee is resistant to his presence, protective of this space she's found, and unwilling to share it with her academic rival. But Lee Eul insists, seeing in Il-deung the same desperate need he saw in Ah-ee, just manifesting differently. Il-deung is trapped by success and pressure, while Ah-ee is trapped by poverty and abandonment, but they're both trapped, and they both need the freedom that magic represents. The three-person dynamic that develops is complex and beautiful. Ah-ee and Il-deung have never really talked before, despite sharing classes for years. They existed in separate worlds defined by their different economic circumstances and social positions. But in the park, learning magic together, those barriers begin to dissolve. They're just two teenagers learning from an eccentric teacher, and in that context, their differences matter less than their similarities. Lee Eul teaches them together and separately, recognizing that they need different things from magic. For Ah-ee, he emphasizes joy and play, trying to help her rediscover the part of herself that once dreamed of being a magician, that still exists under all the exhaustion and cynicism. For Il-deung, he emphasizes freedom and choice, showing him that life can contain spontaneity and unpredictability, that not everything has to be planned and controlled and measured against external standards. One of the most significant early tricks Lee Eul teaches them involves making something vanish. The technique is standard, nothing Il-deung couldn't learn from a book or video. But Lee Eul frames it differently. "What do you want to make disappear?" he asks them. "What do you wish would vanish from your life?" This transforms the magic lesson into something deeper, an exploration of their desires and fears. Ah-ee, when she attempts the trick, imagines making her poverty disappear, making the debt collectors and broken appliances and empty refrigerator vanish into nothing. Il-deung imagines making his parents' expectations disappear, the constant pressure to be perfect and first place and everything they demand him to be. They both succeed at the trick, making a small object vanish and reappear. But the real magic is the moment of imagining that their real problems might be solved just as easily. Of course, they can't actually make their problems disappear. Lee Eul doesn't promise that magic will solve their real-world difficulties. But he suggests something else, that magic can help them cope with what they cannot change, can provide moments of respite and wonder that make the difficult parts of life bearable. The magic isn't an escape from reality, but a way of surviving reality without being completely crushed by it. The manhwa depicts these magic lessons in visually distinctive sequences. The usual black and white panels might suddenly feature bursts of color when a trick succeeds, or the panel layouts might become more creative and dynamic, breaking free from standard grid patterns. These visual choices reflect the experience of magic itself, reality briefly transforming into something more vibrant and less constrained by normal rules. As Ah-ee becomes more skilled at magic and more comfortable in the park, she starts to change in visible ways. She begins wearing her hair differently, not because she's trying to be pretty, but because she's starting to care about her appearance for her own sake, rather than just trying to be invisible. She smiles more often, even at school where magic should have no place. Other students notice and comment on the change, asking if something good happened, if she has a boyfriend, unable to imagine that what changed is internal rather than external circumstances. Il-daeung's transformation is equally noticeable. His perfect posture relaxes slightly. He starts to question teachers occasionally, not disrespectfully, but genuinely asking why things are done certain ways, rather than blindly accepting everything he's told. His grades remain high but not absolutely perfect, as if he's deliberately allowing himself to be less than the best. This absolutely terrifies his parents, who see any deviation from perfection as a disaster, but for Il-daeung, it represents the first steps toward freedom. The two students also begin developing a relationship that starts as simple companionship, but gradually becomes more complicated. Il-daeung is clearly attracted to Ah-ee, drawn to her strength and authenticity, the way she's survived impossible circumstances while he's been carried along on a cushion of privilege. Ah-ee is more uncertain about her feelings, but she appreciates Il-daeung's quiet presence, the way he listens without judgment, the unexpected kindness he shows her. Lee Eul watches these developing relationships with what seems like satisfaction but also sadness, as if he recognizes patterns from his own past playing out again. He encourages the students to care about each other, to build connections that will support them when the magic lessons end and they have to face the real world again. But there's something in his expression during these moments that suggests he knows magic alone isn't enough, that eventually his students will have to choose whether to keep believing or return to practical reality. The magic lessons also involve exploration of the park itself. Lee Eul takes Ah-ee and Il-daeung to different locations within the ruins, each chosen for its specific qualities and atmosphere. They practice card tricks on what used to be a picnic bench, now weathered and unstable but still functional. They learn coin sleights while standing in line for a ride that will never move again, imagining what it was like when families waited here excited for their turn. They perform for an audience of empty carousel horses, learning to commit fully to a performance even when no one living is watching. These explorations serve multiple purposes. Practically, they help Ah-ee and Il-daeung become comfortable in the park, so it transforms from a scary, creepy place into familiar ground. Symbolically, they're learning that magic can exist anywhere, even in ruins, even in spaces that society has abandoned. The message is clear. If magic can survive here, in this dead place, it can survive in their lives too, no matter how difficult circumstances become. One particularly significant lesson involves making the Ferris wheel move, or at least appear to move. Lee Eul takes Ah-ee up to one of the gondolas, which is dangerous given the ride's state of disrepair, but the risk is part of the magic. As they sit in the swaying gondola, the wheel begins to turn, impossibly, beautifully, lifting them into the air as lights appear and music plays. Ah-ee can see the entire neighborhood from this elevated vantage point, her problems made small by distance and perspective. Is the Ferris wheel actually moving? The manhwa never definitively answers this question. We see it through Ah-ee's perception, and from her perspective, it's absolutely real. Whether it's an elaborate illusion, a trick of light and sound and suggestion, or actual magic doesn't matter as much as the effect it has on her. For the first time in years, Ah-ee feels light, unburdened, lifted above her circumstances literally and metaphorically. She laughs freely, a sound we haven't heard from her before, and for a moment she's just a girl experiencing something wonderful. Il-kyun, watching from the ground, sees the Ferris wheel turn and sees Ah-ee's joy, and something breaks open in him as well. He wants that, wants to experience that freedom and wonder, wants to believe that life can contain moments of pure magic unburdened by expectations or future consequences. When it's his turn to ride the Ferris wheel with Lee Eul, he lets himself believe completely, surrendering to the experience without analysing it or questioning it, and that surrender is perhaps the greatest magic of all. These early encounters and transformations set the stage for everything that follows. The students have tasted magic and found it good. They've begun to change, to soften, to hope again. They've formed connections with each other, and with Lee Eul, that matter more than academic rankings or social status. They've found a refuge from their normal lives and a teacher who sees them as people rather than problems or projects. But magic always comes with a cost, and refuge cannot last forever. The real world, with all its harshness and practicality, is waiting outside the park gates. Eventually it will intrude, bringing with it questions, accusations, and threats that magic alone cannot defend against. The transformation has begun, but whether these changes can survive contact with reality remains to be seen. Chapter 7. The Dark Turn. Suspicion, Accusation, and Investigation. The sanctuary of the abandoned amusement park cannot remain inviolate forever. As Ah-ee and Il-kyun spend more time there, as they change in visible ways and their connection to the mysterious magician becomes known, the outside world begins to take notice. What follows is a collision between the magical space Lee Eul has created and the harsh, pragmatic reality of society, which cannot tolerate what it doesn't understand and cannot control. The first crack in the sanctuary comes from school. Teachers notice that both Ah-ee and Il-kyun seem distracted, that they're spending time together in ways that don't fit the competitive academic dynamic between them. Questions are asked about where they go after school, what they're doing, whether this relationship is inappropriate in some way. The teachers frame their concern as care for the students' well-being and academic success, but there's an undertone of social control, of adults who feel entitled to know and approve every aspect of young people's lives. Ah-ee's boss at the convenience store also starts paying more attention to her. Kim Do-sik, who has always been inappropriately interested in his young employee, becomes more overtly predatory as he senses that Ah-ee is somehow slipping away from his control. She's less desperate, less compliant, showing signs of having something in her life that matters to her beyond survival. This change in power dynamic threatens him, so he attempts to reassert control through intimidation and sexual harassment. One particularly disturbing scene shows Do-sik demanding that Ah-ee work late, insisting she owes him for all the times he's been flexible with her schedule. When she tries to refuse, citing another commitment, her magic lesson, he becomes aggressive, cornering her and making his expectations clear. The situation is genuinely frightening, showing how vulnerable young women in Ah-ee's position are to abuse from those with power over them. Lee Eul's intervention saves Ah-ee from what might have become a sexual assault. He appears at the convenience store, somehow knowing that Ah-ee is in danger, and confronts Do-sik. What exactly Lee Eul does is left ambiguous, but Do-sik ends up outside, disoriented and terrified, while Ah-ee is safe. Lee Eul makes Do-sik disappear from Ah-ee's life, at least temporarily, and this act of protection cements Ah-ee's trust in the magician, but this intervention has consequences. Do-sik doesn't just accept his humiliation and move on. He's angry, frightened, and looking for revenge. He starts spreading rumors about Lee Eul, describing him as dangerous and possibly insane. He exaggerates what happened, turning Lee Eul's protection of Ah-ee into an unprovoked assault. These rumors find fertile ground in a community already suspicious of the strange man living in the abandoned amusement park. Around this same time, a female student from the school goes missing. Seo Ha-yoon, a girl from Ah-ee's class, simply doesn't come home one night. The police are called, searches are conducted, and fear ripples through the community. In the midst of this fear and uncertainty, people look for someone to blame, and their attention inevitably turns to Lee Eul, the outsider, the weird magician who doesn't fit into normal society. The rumors start slowly but build rapidly. Someone saw a man in a magician's costume near where Ha-yoon was last seen. Someone else claims to have witnessed suspicious activity in the amusement park. Old stories resurface about other disappearances that occurred years ago, possibly connected to the park or to someone matching Lee Eul's description. None of these stories have solid evidence behind them, but in the face of fear and uncertainty, evidence seems less important than having someone to suspect. The police begin investigating Lee Eul. They visit the park, question him, demand identification and explanations for his presence there. Lee Eul's inability or unwillingness to provide satisfactory answers makes him appear more suspicious. He doesn't have standard identification. He can't provide employment records or residential history. His explanation for living in an abandoned park, because I'm a magician, and this is where I do magic, sounds evasive at best and delusional at worst. Ah-ee and Il-deung learn about the investigation from school gossip and news reports. They're horrified by the accusations against Lee Eul, convinced of his innocence but unsure how to defend him. What can they say? That they've been secretly meeting with this adult man in an abandoned park after school? That he's been teaching them magic tricks? That he once helped Ah-ee escape from a sexually aggressive employer? All of this sounds suspicious when stated plainly, lacking the context and feeling that made the relationships meaningful. Il-deung, thinking strategically, tries to create an alibi for Lee Eul, attempting to prove he was somewhere else when Ha-yoon disappeared. But the truth is that neither he nor Ah-ee actually knows where Lee Eul is at any given time when they're not with him. He lives in the park but also wanders, appearing and disappearing with the unpredictability that once seemed magical but now seems potentially incriminating. The manhwa's visual style shifts during this section, becoming darker and more claustrophobic. The grey tones that predominated earlier now feel oppressive rather than merely melancholic. The abandoned park, previously depicted as a sanctuary, begins to look more menacing, with shadows that could hide threats and the decay suggesting danger rather than poignant beauty. This visual shift reflects how quickly magic can transform into suspicion when viewed through the lens of fear and social panic. Ah-ee faces pressure from multiple directions. Her teachers suggest, not so subtly, that she should stop spending time at the park and distance herself from Lee Eul. Other students, those who always looked down on her for her poverty, now have a new reason to gossip about her, whispering about how she's been hanging around with a suspected criminal. Even her younger sister asks questions, worried and confused about why her big sister is involved in something that seems so scary. Il-deung's situation is even more complicated because of his family's status. His father, the prosecutor, hears about the investigation and about his son's connection to the suspect. The conversation between Il-deung and his father is tense and revealing. The father isn't primarily concerned with whether Lee Eul is actually guilty or with the truth of what happened. He's concerned with appearances, with how Il-deung's association with this situation might reflect on the family and affect Il-deung's future prospects. When Il-deung tries to defend Lee Eul, explaining that he's innocent and that the accusations are based on prejudice rather than evidence, his father responds with coldly practical logic. Whether Lee Eul is technically innocent doesn't matter if he's been accused. Association with him will damage Il-deung's reputation and opportunities. The smart thing, the practical thing, is to cut all ties and distance himself immediately. Il-deung's moral certainty about Lee Eul's innocence is irrelevant compared to the social consequences of supporting him. This conversation crystallizes the conflict between the values Lee Eul has been teaching: belief, wonder, loyalty, kindness, and the values Il-deung's father represents: pragmatism, social status, self-protection. Il-deung must choose between the magic lessons and everything they've meant to him and the safe, respectable path his family has laid out. For the first time in his life, he explicitly chooses against his father's wishes, refusing to abandon Lee Eul despite the consequences. Meanwhile, the search for the missing student continues, and the police investigation intensifies. They discover that Lee Eul has a history, that his real name is Ryu Min-hyuk, that he was once a top student himself before something happened that led to a psychiatric hospitalization. They learn he escaped from a mental health facility, which in their eyes explains everything. He's not a harmless eccentric or a gifted illusionist. He's mentally ill, potentially dangerous, someone who should be in treatment rather than living freely in an abandoned park. This revelation about Lee Eul's past is carefully placed in the narrative. We learn about it when Ah-ee and Il-deung do, seeing their shock and uncertainty. The man they trusted, who has been kind and magical and safe, has a history of mental illness and institutional confinement. Does this change who he is? Does it mean he might actually be dangerous? Should they be afraid of him after all? These questions force both students to confront their own prejudices and assumptions about mental illness. Il-deung, who has felt the crushing weight of pressure that can drive someone to extremes, finds it easier to maintain his faith in Lee Eul. He can imagine circumstances that might lead someone to need psychiatric treatment without making them a bad person or a threat. Ah-ee, who has survived through careful threat assessment and protective cynicism, finds it harder, cycling between trust and doubt. The manhwa handles these revelations with care, neither demonizing mental illness nor pretending it's completely irrelevant. Lee Eul's history helps explain some of his choices and behavior, but it doesn't define him or make him dangerous. The real danger comes from a society that cannot accept anyone different, that needs to categorize people as either normal and safe or abnormal and threatening, with no middle ground for someone who is simply different. The missing student, Ha-yoon, is eventually found alive but traumatized. She was kidnapped by someone completely unrelated to Lee Eul, a crime of opportunity that had nothing to do with magic or amusement parks. But by the time this is confirmed, the damage to Lee Eul's reputation is done. People's minds are made up. The facts of the case matter less than the narrative they've constructed about the weird magician who probably should have been locked up anyway for everyone's safety. But there's a complication. Do-sik, the convenience store owner who Lee Eul humiliated, is found severely injured after claiming that Lee Eul pushed him off a small cliff near the park. This incident, which might have been self-inflicted or accidental during a confrontation Do-sik initiated, is interpreted as evidence of Lee Eul's violence and instability. The fact that Do-sik is a sexual predator who had been harassing Ah-ee doesn't enter the public narrative. He's positioned as a victim, while Lee Eul becomes an undeniable danger. An additional crime is attributed to Lee Eul, a mugging of an elderly woman near the park. Witnesses report seeing someone in a magician's costume, and circumstantial evidence seems to point to Lee Eul. Il-deung, investigating on his own, discovers security footage that suggests the real culprit might have been someone else dressed similarly, deliberately framing Lee Eul. But this evidence is ignored or dismissed by authorities already convinced of the magician's guilt. The police move to arrest Lee Eul, planning to forcibly return him to psychiatric treatment and charge him with assault. When they arrive at the park with this intention, they find that many of the rumors about his magical abilities seem to have basis in reality. He evades them in ways that seem impossible, appearing and disappearing, leading them in circles through the park until they're not sure whether they're chasing one person or several, whether they're experiencing reality or being subjected to elaborate illusions. This sequence is depicted with visual ambiguity that mirrors the character's uncertainty. We see Lee Eul in multiple places simultaneously, or we see him vanish in ways that could be clever use of the park's layout and shadows, or could be actual magic. The police officers become frightened and confused, their professional certainty dissolving in the face of something they can't understand or control. Ah-ee and Il-deung, learning about the attempted arrest, rush to the park to warn Lee Eul, or help him, or simply be with him during this crisis. They find him calm, but sad, resigned to what's happening, but not defeated. He thanks them for believing in him, for learning his magic, for reminding him why magic matters. And then he asks them one final time, "Do you believe in magic?" Both of them, without hesitation, answer yes. They believe in magic because they've experienced it, because it's changed them, because the alternative is returning to the grey existence they had before meeting Lee Eul. Their belief is absolute in this moment, undiluted by doubt or practicality. They believe in magic even though believing might mean social consequences, even though the world is telling them their belief is foolish and their teacher is dangerous. Lee Eul smiles at their declaration, and for a moment, the sadness lifts from his face. This is what he needed. Genuine belief, not in tricks or illusions, but in the importance of wonder, the possibility of magic, the value of dreams over practicality. Having found that belief, having successfully passed it on to students who will carry it forward, perhaps his own story can reach some kind of resolution. The dark turn in Annarasumanara's narrative is necessary and inevitable. The magic couldn't remain isolated in the abandoned park forever, protected from scrutiny and consequence. The collision between wonder and reality, between belief and pragmatic cynicism, between individual freedom and social control, must occur for the story to complete its arc. The question now is whether magic can survive this collision, whether Ah-ee and Il-deung's belief is strong enough to protect what they've learned, and what price Lee Eul will pay for offering them magic in a world that has decided it doesn't want or need it. Chapter 8. The Magician's Past. Ryu Min-hyuk's tragic story. To understand Lee Eul fully, we must eventually learn who he was before he became the magician in the abandoned amusement park. The revelation of his past is carefully placed in the narrative, coming at the moment when Ah-ee and Il-deung need to decide whether they still believe in him despite his history. This backstory is not a flashback sequence shown to readers before characters discover it. Instead, we learn about Ryu Min-hyuk's story at the same time Ah-ee and Il-deung do, through the words of a former classmate who has remained in contact with the magician. This classmate, now a pregnant woman who brings Lee Eul food occasionally and seems to be the only person from his past who still cares about him, tells Ah-ee and Il-deung about who Ryu Min-hyuk used to be. Her narration is gentle but matter-of-fact, describing a person who was once as trapped as Il-deung currently is, perhaps even more so. Ryu Min-hyuk came from an exemplary family by conventional standards. Both parents were teachers, respected in their community and dedicated to education. His siblings were all academically successful, living up to the family's values and expectations. Min-hyuk himself was extraordinarily gifted, the kind of student who achieves top marks without apparent effort, who excels in everything he attempts, who seems destined for greatness according to conventional measures of success. The parallels between Min-hyuk's past and Il-deung's present are deliberately obvious. Both are top students from privileged backgrounds. Both have families that pressure them toward predetermined paths of success. Both are suffocating under expectations that never acknowledge them as individuals with their own desires and dreams. The difference is that Min-hyuk's story has already played out to its tragic conclusion, while Il-deung still has the chance to choose a different ending. As the classmate describes him, young Min-hyuk was pure as a sheet of white paper, someone without guile or defenses, sincere and earnest in everything he did. He believed what he was taught, tried to please his parents and teachers, genuinely attempted to become the person everyone wanted him to be. For years, this seemed to work. He was successful, praised, held up as an example to other students. From the outside, his life looked perfect. But something was building beneath the surface. The pressure never stopped. Every success led to higher expectations rather than satisfaction. Good grades meant he should have perfect grades. Perfect grades meant he should be taking more advanced classes. Academic success meant he should also excel in extracurriculars, in leadership, in everything. There was never a moment when he could simply be good enough, when he could rest or pursue something because he wanted to, rather than because it would look impressive on university applications. Min Hyuk began to crack at the start of a new semester. The signs were subtle at first. He became quiet and withdrawn, losing the cheerful energy that had characterized him. His grades started slipping, not dramatically but enough to be noticeable, enough to disappoint his parents and teachers. He seemed distant, distracted, as if part of him was somewhere else while his body went through the motions of school life. The people around him responded to these warning signs in the worst possible way. Instead of asking what was wrong, instead of suggesting he might need help or a break, they pushed harder. His parents increased the pressure, assuming that their son was simply slacking off, that he needed to work harder and focus more. His teachers expressed disappointment, reminding him of his potential and how he was wasting it. Other students, jealous of his previous success, took satisfaction in seeing him struggle. One day, Min Hyuk collapsed in class. He was taken to the school infirmary, and everyone assumed he was sick or exhausted from studying too hard. But while lying in the infirmary, supposedly resting, Min Hyuk continued studying. His mind was trapped in a loop where studying was the only thing he knew how to do, the only way he understood to be valuable as a person. Even when his body physically could not continue, when his mind was breaking under the strain, he kept trying to study because stopping meant admitting failure. The breaking point came shortly after this incident. Min Hyuk climbed to the roof of the school building and attempted suicide. He didn't leave a note explaining why. He didn't make a dramatic statement. He simply tried to end his life because the pressure had become unbearable and he saw no other way out. The attempt failed. He survived the fall with injuries, but the person who climbed those stairs died anyway in every way that mattered. This attempted suicide is depicted in the Manhwa with haunting visual poetry. We see Min Hyuk standing at the edge of the roof, looking out over the city spread below him. The panel is mostly white, empty space, suggesting the blankness he feels, the absence of hope or purpose or connection. His figure is small against this emptiness, emphasizing his isolation and powerlessness. When he steps off the edge, the panels invert, black instead of white, the fall into darkness, both literal and metaphorical. After his suicide attempt, Min Hyuk was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility. His parents, suddenly aware that something was seriously wrong, went from demanding excellence to demanding he get better and return to normal as quickly as possible. But there was no normal to return to. The person Min Hyuk had been was constructed entirely around meeting expectations and achieving success. And when that structure collapsed, there was nothing underneath. He had no sense of self independent from his achievements, no identity beyond being the top student, no dreams or desires that were truly his own. The treatment facility kept him safe, protected him from another suicide attempt, but it couldn't give him a reason to live. The staff treated his depression with medication and therapy, but the fundamental problem, the crushing social and familial pressure that had driven him to the roof in the first place, continued unchanged outside the hospital walls. His family and community were waiting for him to get fixed so he could resume the path they'd laid out for him, completely missing that it was that path itself that had nearly killed him. At some point during his hospitalization, Min Hyuk discovered magic. The details are left vague. Perhaps he watched a performance on television. Perhaps another patient had an interest in magic and introduced him to it. Perhaps he found a book about illusion and sleight of hand. The specific mechanism doesn't matter as much as what magic represented to him. A completely different way of existing. A life devoted to wonder rather than achievement. A path that had nothing to do with being first place or meeting anyone's expectations. Magic became his lifeline, the one thing that made living seem worth attempting again. He learned tricks obsessively, practicing instead of studying, discovering joy in the perfection of an illusion rather than the perfection of a test score. Magic didn't care about his family's expectations or his previous achievements. It offered a blank slate, a chance to be someone completely different from Ryu Min-hyuk, the top student. He could become Lee Eul the magician, leaving behind everything that had nearly destroyed him. Eventually, Min-hyuk left the psychiatric facility. Whether this was an official discharge or an escape, the manhwa leaves deliberately unclear. He didn't return home to his family, didn't resume his education, didn't attempt to salvage any part of his former life. Instead, he found his way to the abandoned amusement park, recognized it as a place outside normal society's reach, and made it his home. He became Lee Eul fully, leaving Ryu Min-hyuk behind like a costume he no longer needed to wear. This backstory reframes everything we've seen from Lee Eul up to this point. His childlike refusal to grow up is not immaturity or whimsy, it's a survival strategy, a way of protecting himself from the adult world that nearly killed him. His insistence on the importance of magic is not just philosophy. It's testimony from someone who found magic when he had nothing else, when belief in wonder was the only thing preventing him from another suicide attempt. His question, "Do you believe in magic?" is really asking, do you believe life can be something other than achievement and pressure and grinding conformity? His connection to Ah-ee and Il-deung now makes even more sense. He sees himself in both of them, particularly in Il-deung, who is currently living the life that broke Min-hyuk. By teaching them magic, by offering them an alternative to the paths society has laid out, Lee Eul is trying to save them from the fate he suffered. He's trying to reach back through time and save his younger self by saving them. The pregnant classmate who shares this story reveals her own connection to Min-hyuk's past. She was the only person who tried to understand what he was going through, rather than simply demanding he get better or judging him for his breakdown. She kept track of him after his hospitalization, maintained contact when everyone else abandoned him, brings him food and companionship, even though he's become someone most people avoid. Her loyalty represents the possibility of human connection based on genuine care rather than conditional approval tied to achievement. Learning this backstory forces Ah-ee and Il-deung to reconsider everything. The magic lessons were never just about learning tricks. They were Lee Eul trying to pass on the thing that saved his life, trying to ensure that these two young people who remind him so much of who he was wouldn't have to experience the same breaking point he did. His kindness wasn't calculated, it was the kindness of someone who survived hell and wants to make sure no one else has to go through the same thing. The manhwa handles this revelation with remarkable empathy, never suggesting that Min-hyuk's mental health struggles make him less valuable or more dangerous, never positioning his suicide attempt as selfish or cowardly. Instead, it presents his breakdown as the logical, almost inevitable result of a system that crushes young people under impossible expectations. Min-hyuk is not uniquely weak or flawed. He's simply someone who reached his breaking point before learning to protect himself from the pressures around him. Il-deung's response to learning this story is particularly powerful. He sees his potential future reflected in Min-hyuk's past with terrifying clarity. If he continues on his current path, if he keeps trying to be perfect and meet every expectation, he could end up exactly where Min-hyuk did, standing on a roof and seeing no other way out. The magic lessons are not a distraction from his real life, but possibly the only thing protecting him from Min-hyuk's fate. For Ah-ee, the story reinforces her belief in Lee Eul's basic goodness. He's not a predator or a threat, but someone who has been wounded and is trying to heal by helping others. His life in the abandoned park isn't laziness or insanity, but a carefully constructed refuge from a world that nearly destroyed him. His magic is not frivolous entertainment, but a life-saving philosophy, a way of insisting that wonder and dreams matter even when everything else says they don't. The revelation of Lee Eul's past also adds tragic weight to the current situation. Society tried to force Min Hyuk into a predetermined mold, and when he broke under that pressure, society labelled him mentally ill and dangerous. Now that he's found a way to survive and even thrive on his own terms, society is trying to force him back into institutional treatment, back into the system that nearly killed him the first time. The message is clear: conform or be punished. The choice to live differently, to value magic over productivity, dreams over achievement, is not allowed. This backstory explains why Lee Eul asks his questions so persistently. Do you believe in magic? Is really asking, do you believe there's a way to live that doesn't involve crushing yourself to fit someone else's expectations? It's asking, do you believe wonder and dreams have value even if they're not productive or respectable? It's asking, do you believe life is worth living for reasons that have nothing to do with success as society defines it? For Min Hyuk, who once couldn't answer that question himself, hearing others answer yes provides validation and hope. Every person who believes in his magic is proof that he was right to save himself, right to choose this strange life, right to insist that there's more to existence than what society prescribes. Ah-ee and Il-kwon's belief in magic is, in some profound sense, belief in Lee Eul's right to exist as he is. Belief that his choice to become a magician, rather than returning to the path that nearly killed him, was valid and worthwhile. The tragedy of Ryu Min Hyuk's story is that it's not unique or even particularly unusual in Korean society, or, frankly, in any society that prioritizes achievement over well-being. The manhwa uses Min Hyuk's extreme response to illustrate a problem affecting countless young people who internalize impossible expectations and measure their worth by their achievements. Most of these young people don't attempt suicide, but they suffer nonetheless, losing themselves in the process of becoming what others want them to be. Lee Eul represents both the cost of this system and the possibility of escape from it. His breakdown and transformation are extreme, but they offer a kind of radical hope. Even after being crushed by expectations, even after losing yourself completely, it's possible to build a new self based on different values. You can choose wonder over success, magic over practicality, dreams over conformity. The choice will cost you, society will punish you for it, but it's possible. And for some people, it might be the only way to survive. As the story moves toward its climax, Min Hyuk's past provides essential context for what happens next. His history explains why he can't simply comply with authorities and return to normal life, why the attempted arrest is not a minor inconvenience but an existential threat. It explains why Ah-ee and Il-kwon's belief in him matters so much, why their willingness to stand with him despite social pressure represents something more significant than simple loyalty. They're choosing magic over conformity, just as he did, and in doing so, they're validating the hardest choice he ever made. Chapter 9: Themes and Symbolism. Growing Up, Magic and Reality. Annarasumanara operates on multiple levels simultaneously, functioning as both a straightforward coming-of-age story and a complex meditation on what it means to grow up in a society that demands conformity over individuality, practicality over wonder, and achievement over happiness. The themes woven throughout the narrative create a rich tapestry of meaning that rewards careful attention and reflection. The central theme is the question of what it really means to grow up. Society provides one answer. Growing up means abandoning childish things, putting away dreams in favor of practical concerns, measuring your worth by your productivity and status, conforming to expected paths toward respectable adulthood. This version of growing up is presented as inevitable and necessary, the price everyone must pay to become a functional adult. But Annarasumanara challenges this definition profoundly. Through Lee Eul, the story asks whether society's version of adulthood is the only version, or even a good version. Lee Eul has reached biological adulthood but refuses to grow up in the conventional sense. He doesn't have a career or own property, he doesn't conform to social expectations or measure his worth by achievement. By society's standards, he's failed at adulthood completely. Yet he seems more alive, more authentic, more true to himself than any of the conventional adults in the story. The manhwa suggests that real maturity might have nothing to do with abandoning dreams and everything to do with discovering what you truly value and having the courage to live according to those values. Ah-ee, in her desperation to become an adult as quickly as possible, is actually running away from herself, trying to skip the work of figuring out who she is and what she wants. Il-kwon, despite his academic perfection, is emotionally immature because he's never had to make real choices or discover his own desires. Lee Eul, for all his childlike qualities, demonstrates the deepest maturity in the story. He knows who he is, what he values, and why. He's made conscious choices about how to live rather than simply accepting what society prescribes. He takes responsibility for those choices even when they result in hardship and social rejection. This is real adulthood, self-knowledge, authentic choice, and acceptance of consequences. The fact that his choices look childish to others doesn't make them less mature. The theme of magic versus reality runs throughout the story, but it's more nuanced than simple escapism versus practicality. The manhwa never definitively confirms whether Lee Eul's magic is supernatural or simply extraordinarily skilled illusion. This ambiguity is central to the story's meaning. The question is not whether magic is objectively real, but whether believing in magic, understanding magic as a metaphor for wonder and possibility, changes how we experience reality. Magic in Annarasumanara represents everything that exists beyond mere survival and practical necessity. It's beauty for its own sake, joy without justification, wonder without utility. It's the part of being human that cannot be reduced to economic productivity or social status. When Lee Eul asks if you believe in magic, he's really asking whether you believe these things matter, whether you think life should contain more than just work and achievement and responsibility. The visual symbolism throughout the manhwa reinforces these themes beautifully. The predominantly black and white art style, with occasional bursts of colour, creates a visual metaphor for the story's exploration of grey existence versus magical possibility. The normal world is rendered in grayscale, sometimes beautiful but often oppressive, drained of vibrancy and life. Colour appears in moments of magic, transformation, and emotional breakthrough, suggesting that magic brings colour back to a world that has become too grey and practical. The butterflies that appear at crucial moments carry rich symbolic weight. Butterflies represent transformation, the process of metamorphosis from one form into something completely different. Ah-ee is undergoing metamorphosis throughout the story, from the grey caterpillar existence of survival to something more colourful and free. The butterflies also suggest beauty and fragility, creatures that live briefly but brilliantly, valuing quality of existence over longevity. Snow appears at several pivotal moments in the narrative, particularly at the end. Snow transforms the familiar world into something strange and new, covering the grey streets and buildings with white that makes everything clean and possible again. Snow in summer, which occurs in the story's conclusion, is impossible by natural laws, yet it happens anyway, suggesting that magic might be real after all, or at least that reality is more flexible and mysterious than we usually acknowledge. The abandoned amusement park itself is perhaps the story's central symbol. Amusement parks are built for joy, for children to experience wonder, and families to create happy memories. This particular park represents joy that has been abandoned, childhood that has been left behind, wonder that society decided wasn't worth maintaining. Lee Eul's choice to live in this space represents reclaiming what society has thrown away, insisting that joy and wonder still have value even when they're no longer profitable or respectable. The various rides and structures within the park carry their own symbolic weight. The Ferris wheel, which appears prominently throughout, represents gaining perspective by rising above your everyday life and seeing things from a different vantage point. The moments when characters ride the Ferris wheel are moments of clarity and transformation, when they can see their lives in new ways. The carousel, with its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, represents childhood dreams that have been interrupted, potential that hasn't been allowed to reach fulfillment. The manhwa explores the relationship between poverty and dreams in complex ways through Ah-ee's character. She represents people for whom dreams seem like luxuries they cannot afford, who are so consumed with immediate survival that longer-term hopes feel impossible. The story neither romanticizes poverty nor suggests that dreams are only for the privileged. Instead, it insists that dreams and wonder are essential for everyone, especially those whose circumstances are most difficult. Magic is not a distraction from Ah-ee's real problems, but a way of surviving those problems without being completely crushed by them. Il-deung's story explores privilege and its costs. He has material advantages Ah-ee lacks, but he's poor in other ways, lacking freedom, autonomy, and authentic connection. The manhwa suggests that both poverty of resources and poverty of freedom can crush dreams and damage people. Neither Ah-ee nor Il-deung is objectively worse off than the other. They're suffering different forms of deprivation, and both desperately need what Lee Eul offers. The theme of conformity versus individuality is central to understanding the story's social critique. Every adult authority figure in the manhwa enforces conformity, whether through explicit rules or subtle social pressure. Teachers demand academic achievement and obedience. Parents impose their own dreams and expectations on their children. Employers exploit vulnerable employees. The community polices anyone who steps outside accepted norms. The system is designed to create compliant, productive citizens who don't question or challenge or dream too big. Lee Eul represents radical refusal of conformity. He has removed himself from the system entirely, living outside its rules and rejecting its values. This makes him dangerous in the eyes of those who benefit from or depend on the system. His mere existence is a challenge to the idea that there's only one acceptable way to live, one path to happiness, one definition of success. By showing Ah-ee and Il-deung an alternative, he threatens the system's hold on them. The story also explores the relationship between sanity and social acceptance. Lee Eul is labelled mentally ill and treated as dangerous, but the manhwa asks us to consider whether his madness might actually be the only sane response to an insane system. Society that drives young people to suicide attempts through excessive pressure, that crushes individuality in favour of conformity, that values productivity over humanity. This society might be the truly sick entity. Lee Eul's choice to live differently might be mental health, not mental illness. Parental abandonment appears in multiple forms throughout the story. Ah-ee's parents literally abandoned her through absence. Il-deung's parents have abandoned him emotionally, seeing him as a project to perfect, rather than a person to know and love. Lee Eul's parents, by imposing crushing expectations, abandoned him to the false self he was forced to construct. The manhwa suggests that there are many ways to abandon your children, and providing material support while crushing their spirit might be just as damaging as disappearing entirely. The role of memory and nostalgia is explored through Ah-ee's gradual recollection of her childhood dreams. She once wanted to be a magician, once believed in magic, once found joy in wonder. These memories have been buried under years of survival and cynicism, but they never completely disappeared. Lee Eul's magic lessons help her excavate these memories, reconnect with who she was before life became about mere survival. The story suggests that our childhood selves, the people we were before we learned to be realistic, might have known important truths we've forgotten. The manhwa also explores questions of belief and truth. What does it mean to believe in magic? Is belief a choice, an emotional response, or a decision about how to interpret reality? Can you choose to believe in something while simultaneously knowing it's not literally true? The story never resolves these questions definitively, but suggests that belief is more complex and important than simple factual accuracy. Social class and economic inequality are examined without being the story's sole focus. The contrast between Ah-ee's poverty and Il-daeung's wealth is never ignored, but also never reduced to simple victim and privilege dynamics. Both characters are trapped by their circumstances in different ways. Both need magic and freedom regardless of their economic positions. The story suggests that capitalism and meritocracy crush both those at the bottom and those at the top, just through different mechanisms. The theme of performance and authenticity runs through the narrative. Magic is all about performance, creating illusions, and managing audience perception. But Lee Eul's magic is presented as more authentic than the performances everyone else engages in. Ah-ee performs being fine when she's drowning. Il-daeung performs being perfect when he's suffocating. Society performs caring about children while crushing them. Lee Eul's performances are honest about being performances, which paradoxically makes them more genuine than the performances that pretend to be reality. Time is treated in interesting ways throughout the manhwa. The grey everyday world moves with grinding linearity, each day following the previous one with exhausting regularity. But time in the amusement park seems different, more fluid and malleable. Magic lessons can feel like minutes or hours depending on the experience, rather than the clock. This suggests that quality of experience matters more than quantity of time, that a life filled with wonder is richer, regardless of its length. The question of responsibility is explored through all three main characters. Ah-ee has been forced to take on adult responsibilities before she's ready, caring for her sister and supporting herself. Il-daeung has never been allowed real responsibility, every decision made for him, every consequence managed by his family. Lee Eul takes responsibility for his own life and choices while rejecting responsibility for society's expectations. The story asks what healthy responsibility looks like, who owes what to whom, and when it's okay to prioritize your own well-being over others' expectations. Educational systems and their impact on young people are critiqued throughout the story. School is depicted not as a place of learning and growth, but as a prison that ranks and sorts students, crushing individuality in favor of standardized achievement. Teachers are shown enforcing this system, rather than helping students discover themselves. The manhwa doesn't offer solutions to these systemic problems, but it does insist on making the problems visible and questioning whether this is really the best way to prepare young people for life. The nature of happiness is a quiet but persistent question throughout Annarasumanara. What does it mean to be happy? Is it achieving success and status? Is it having enough money to feel secure? Is it experiencing moments of joy and wonder? The characters start with different theories about happiness, and their journeys involve discovering what actually brings them satisfaction versus what they've been told should make them happy. Finally, the story explores the relationship between art and life, suggesting that magic, like art, is essential rather than frivolous. Magic doesn't feed you or pay your rent, but it provides something equally necessary: meaning, beauty, connection, wonder. A life without magic, without art, without anything beyond survival and achievement might technically be a life, but it's missing something essential to being human. These themes don't exist in isolation, but weave together throughout the narrative, each enriching and complicating the others. The manhwa trusts its readers to engage with these ideas, never stopping to explain its symbolism explicitly or reduce its themes to simple morals. This respect for reader intelligence is one of Annarasumanara's greatest strengths, allowing the story to operate as both an accessible narrative and a complex meditation on what it means to live authentically in a world that demands conformity. Chapter 10. The Climax: Belief, Escape, and Final Performance. As police surround the abandoned amusement park and authorities close in on Lee Eul, the story reaches its emotional and thematic climax. Everything that has been building throughout the narrative, questions about reality and illusion, the price of choosing magic over conformity, the power of belief to transform lives, comes together in sequences that blend heartbreak, triumph, and deliberate ambiguity. Lee Eul knows he cannot remain in the park much longer. The sanctuary is compromised, and staying will mean arrest, forced psychiatric treatment, and a return to the system that nearly destroyed him once before. But he doesn't flee immediately. He has one final lesson to teach Ah-ee and Il-kwon, one last piece of magic to share before their time together ends. He gathers his students in their usual meeting place within the park, perhaps for the final time. The mood is bittersweet, weighted with the knowledge that change is coming, whether they want it or not. Lee Eul looks at these two young people who have become so important to him, who remind him of who he was and show him who he might have been if someone had offered him magic before he broke. He has given them everything he knows about magic, but the most important lesson remains. Real magic, Lee Eul tells them, doesn't happen in abandoned parks or on stages. Real magic happens in here. He points to his heart. Magic is believing in impossible things even when the world insists you be practical. Magic is holding on to wonder even when life tries to crush it out of you. Magic is living according to what you truly value instead of what society says you should want. He explains that the tricks he's taught them, the card sleights and coin manipulations and illusions, are not the real magic. Those are just techniques, tools for creating moments of wonder. The real magic is the decision to value those moments, to insist that beauty and joy and dreams matter even when they're not productive or profitable or respectable. The real magic is refusing to let the world make you into something you're not. Ah-ee and Il-kwon understand, perhaps for the first time, what Lee Eul has really been teaching them. It was never about learning to perform tricks. It was about learning to live as themselves, to resist the pressures that were crushing them, to believe in their own worth beyond their achievements or circumstances. The magic lessons were really lessons in staying human in a dehumanizing system. Then Lee Eul asks them one final time, "Do you believe in magic?" But this time, he's not asking whether they believe in his illusions. He's asking whether they'll continue to believe in magic after he's gone, whether the lessons will persist even without his presence to reinforce them, whether they've truly internalized the philosophy he's been teaching, or if they'll revert to their previous existence once the magician is no longer there to remind them. Both Ah-ee and Il-kwon answer with absolute conviction. Yes, they believe in magic. They believe it because they've experienced it, because it's changed them in ways they can never undo, because the alternative is returning to lives that were killing them slowly. Their belief is not blind faith, but earned conviction, the result of transformation they've undergone through Lee Eul's teaching. This declaration of belief is precisely what Lee Eul needed to hear. His work is complete. He has passed on the magic that saved his life, ensuring it will persist even after he's gone. Ah-ee and Il-kwon will carry it forward, keeping the flame alive, perhaps passing it on to others someday. His time in the park has mattered. His choice to live as a magician rather than returning to conventional life was validated. What happens next is depicted with deliberate ambiguity that allows multiple interpretations. The police arrive to arrest Lee Eul, but he doesn't surrender. Instead, he performs one final impossible magic trick. Some versions of the story suggest that Ah-ee helps him escape through a magical illusion, that she has learned well enough to execute convincingly. Other interpretations suggest that Lee Eul simply vanishes, using his mastery of illusion and intimate knowledge of the park to evade capture in ways that seem impossible to observers. The most magical interpretation, and the one the manhwa seems to favor without quite confirming, is that Lee Eul performs genuine magic in this moment, transcending the laws of physics because the belief of his students gives him power he previously lacked. Ah-ee creates an illusion so convincing, so full of belief and wonder, that it becomes real in some essential sense. She makes Lee Eul disappear not through trickery, but through the same kind of magic he has been teaching all along, the magic of belief transforming reality. This escape sequence is rendered in gorgeous dreamlike panels that shift between perspective and possibility. We see Lee Eul from multiple angles simultaneously. We see him solid, and then translucent. We see police officers reaching for him and grasping empty air. We see Ah-ee performing magic with tears streaming down her face, channeling every lesson she's learned, every moment of wonder she's experienced, into one final impossible act. Whether this is literal magic or extraordinarily skilled illusion, aided by luck and police incompetence, doesn't matter as much as what it represents. Ah-ee has learned magic well enough to save her teacher, demonstrating that the lessons have taken root and will persist. Il-kyun witnesses this and understands that magic is real because belief makes it real, because the world is more mysterious and flexible than pragmatic reality wants to admit. Before Lee Eul vanishes completely, he has brief final moments with each of his students. To Il-kyun, he says something about staying true to yourself, about not letting anyone force you into a shape that doesn't fit. He reminds Il-kyun that being first place means nothing if you're first at becoming someone you don't want to be. He gives Il-kyun permission to fail by society's standards while succeeding at becoming himself. To Ah-ee, Lee Eul's message is more complex. He thanks her for believing in him, for learning his magic, for proving that wonder can survive even in the harshest circumstances. He tells her that she doesn't have to choose between being an adult and being a dreamer, that the best adulthood involves bringing your dreams with you, rather than abandoning them. He sees her younger sister watching from a distance and makes a gesture that might be a blessing or a promise that the magic will continue. Then he speaks to both of them together, his final lesson. You're real magicians now, not because you can do tricks, but because you've learned to believe in impossible things. Carry that belief forward. Don't let them make you practical. Don't let them kill your dreams. The world needs magic even when it pretends it doesn't, especially when it pretends it doesn't. With those words, Lee Eul is gone. The panels show the space where he stood, now empty. Police search frantically but find nothing. The park, which has been his home and sanctuary, is suddenly just an abandoned space again, no longer animated by his presence. The magical quality that suffused the location seems to dim, though Ah-ee and Il-kyun still see it, still feel the magic that remains in the air like a blessing. The immediate aftermath of Lee Eul's disappearance brings consequences for everyone. Ah-ee faces questioning from police and school authorities about her connection to the suspected criminal. Il-kyun's father is furious about his son's involvement, threatening punishment and imposing even stricter controls. The community gossips and judges, convinced that the strange magician was dangerous, and these foolish teenagers were lucky to escape whatever harm he might have intended. But something has changed in both Ah-ee and Il-kyun that cannot be undone. They have tasted magic, experienced wonder, learned that life can contain more than just survival and achievement. They've had a teacher who saw them as people rather than projects or problems, who offered them knowledge without demanding anything in return, who showed them a different way to live. They've learned to believe in magic, and that belief has become part of who they are, impossible to extract or forget. Ah-ee begins to change her life in small but significant ways. She stands up to authority figures who have been exploiting or dismissing her. She allows herself moments of joy and play, even when she technically should be working or studying. She starts to dream again, not just about escaping poverty, but about what she might want to do with her life if she had choices. Il-kwon. The magic lessons have given her back her sense of self, reminded her that she is more than just a survival machine grinding through days. Il-kwon's changes are equally profound. He openly defies his father for the first time, refusing to accept that his life must follow the predetermined path laid out for him. He allows his grades to slip deliberately, testing whether the world will end if he's not perfect. He pursues friendship with Ah-ee openly despite social pressure and his family's disapproval. He starts asking what he wants rather than simply accepting what others want from him. These changes come with costs. Ah-ee loses jobs when employers realize she won't tolerate exploitation anymore. Il-kwon faces consequences from his family, including threats about his future education and support. Both face social ostracism from classmates and community members who have judged their association with the disappeared magician. But they face these costs together, supporting each other, and the friendship they've developed through shared magic lessons helps them survive the backlash. The climax of Annarasumanara is not a single dramatic moment, but a series of interconnected transformations. Lee Eul's escape is one climax, the moment when magic either proves itself real or proves that the question of its reality doesn't matter because belief has power regardless. The student's declaration of continued belief, despite consequences, is another climax, the moment when they choose magic over conformity with full knowledge of the costs. The changes they begin making in their lives represent a third climax, the moment when lessons become action and philosophy becomes lived reality. The Manhwa handles these climactic moments with remarkable restraint, never overselling the drama or forcing emotions that should speak for themselves. The art becomes more experimental during these sequences, with panel layouts that break traditional structures, with perspective shifts that mirror the characters' altered perception of reality, with use of white space and shadow that creates mood more effectively than dialogue could. Throughout these final lessons and the escape sequence, Minyo, the parrot, serves as a kind of witness and commentator. The bird speaks words that seem impossibly appropriate, as if channeling Lee Eul's thoughts or perhaps possessing its own understanding of what's happening. When Lee Eul disappears, Minyo remains, later appearing near Ah-ee at crucial moments, suggesting that some connection to the magician persists even after he's gone. The emotional weight of this section comes from the character's awareness that they're living through an ending while simultaneously experiencing a beginning. They're losing their teacher but gaining the tools to teach themselves. They're saying goodbye to the sanctuary of the park, but taking its magic with them into the wider world. They're ending their apprenticeship, but beginning their lives as real magicians, ready to create their own impossible things. Lee Eul's final performance is not a stage show with an audience, but a disappearing act that defies logical explanation. Yet it's his most successful performance precisely because it's witnessed only by people who truly believe in magic, who can appreciate what he's accomplished. He doesn't need to convince skeptics or prove anything to authorities. He performs for his students, showing them one last time that magic is real if you believe in it strongly enough. This climax resolves the story's central questions, not through definitive answers, but through embracing mystery and possibility. Is magic real? Does it matter? Can belief in impossible things actually change reality? The Manhwa answers, yes, in all the ways that truly count. Magic is real because Ah-ee and Il-kwon are different now, because they've learned to see wonder in the world, because they've reclaimed their capacity to dream. Whether Lee Eul vanished through supernatural means or clever illusion is less important than the fact that he succeeded in passing on his magic, ensuring that wonder will persist even after he's gone. Chapter 11, The Epilogue, 3 Years Later and Legacy. The final chapter of Annarasumanara takes place 3 years after Lee Eul's disappearance, showing us how the magic lessons have affected Ah-ee and Il-young's lives in the long term. This epilogue is essential to the story's meaning, demonstrating that the transformation the characters underwent was not temporary escapism, but lasting change that has shaped their adult identities. We see Ah-ee first, and the change in her is immediately apparent. She has reached the adulthood she once desperately wanted, but it looks nothing like what she imagined. She's not grinding away at some corporate job, sacrificing everything for stability and security. Instead, she works as a magician, performing for children at a family restaurant, bringing wonder and joy to young lives, just as Lee Eul brought wonder and joy to hers. This career choice is significant on multiple levels. Magician is not a practical, stable, well-paying profession, especially not at the level of performing at restaurants and small events. It's exactly the kind of impractical dream that the old Ah-ee would have dismissed as childish and unrealistic. By choosing this path, adult Ah-ee is living proof that the lessons took root, that she has successfully integrated magic into her adult life, rather than abandoning it as most people abandon their childhood dreams. Her costume echoes Lee Eul's in some ways, a deliberate homage to her teacher, but adapted to fit her own style and personality. She wears it with confidence and joy, clearly loving her work even if it doesn't pay particularly well or impress anyone with its prestige. When she performs for children, we see that she has mastered not just the techniques Lee Eul taught her, but the philosophy behind them. She creates moments of genuine wonder, making children believe in magic the way Lee Eul made her believe again. The Manhwa shows us Ah-ee's living situation, which is modest but significantly better than the poverty of her teenage years. She has a small but comfortable apartment. She can afford food and clothes without constant anxiety. Most importantly, she has taken care of her younger sister, ensuring that the responsibility she bore as a teenager has borne fruit in a stable, if not luxurious, adult life. She has succeeded at the practical goals she once thought mattered most, but she has achieved them without sacrificing her dreams or sense of self. We learn through small details that Ah-ee still writes letters to her mother, who has never responded and possibly never receives them. This ongoing practice suggests unresolved pain and longing that magic has not completely healed, but it also shows growth and maturity, the ability to maintain hope and connection even when they're not reciprocated. She also writes to Lee Eul, addressed to nowhere because she doesn't know where he went, sharing updates about her life and thanking him for his lessons. These letters are acts of faith, messages sent into the void with no expectation of response, but written anyway because they matter to her. Il-young appears in the epilogue as well, and his trajectory is equally significant. He has pursued higher education, but not according to the rigid plan his father laid out. He's studying something he's actually interested in, rather than something that maximizes status and earning potential. The manhwa doesn't specify exactly what he's studying, suggesting that the specific field matters less than the fact that it's his choice, reflecting his genuine interests rather than someone else's ambitions for him. His relationship with his family is still complicated, but has reached a kind of détente. His parents haven't accepted his choices, but they're no longer actively fighting him about them. Il-young has learned to maintain boundaries, to protect his autonomy even while staying connected to his family. This represents mature compromise rather than either total rebellion or complete submission. Most tellingly, Il-young and Ah-ee have maintained their relationship. The manhwa is deliberately subtle about whether this is romantic or simply deep friendship, suggesting that the label matters less than the genuine connection they share. They meet up to practice magic together, supporting each other's continued belief in wonder and possibility. They've created a two-person community of believers, ensuring that neither of them has to face the practical adult world, completely alone. A crucial scene in the epilogue shows Il-kwon finally taking Ah-ee on a proper date, something he's wanted to do since they first started learning magic together. They go to places that have meaning for them, places connected to their memories of Lee Eul and the park. They practice magic tricks for each other, laughing and talking in ways that would have been impossible when they first met. Their relationship, whatever its exact nature, represents everything they learned from Lee Eul about authentic connection based on shared values rather than social expectation. The abandoned amusement park appears in the epilogue, but it has changed. There are suggestions that it might be demolished or redeveloped, that the sanctuary that protected Lee Eul and hosted the magic lessons cannot remain isolated from commercial reality forever. But before it disappears, Ah-ee and Il-kwon visit it together one final time, walking the paths they walked as teenagers, remembering their lessons, paying tribute to what happened there. In this final visit to the park, something magical occurs. It might be snow falling in summer, an impossibility that suggests magic is still active in this space. It might be the Ferris wheel moving briefly, impossibly, giving them one final ride. The exact manifestation varies slightly depending on which version of the story you're experiencing, but the meaning is consistent. Magic is still here, still real, still possible if you believe in it strongly enough. During this visit, Ah-ee talks about Lee Eul, wondering where he went, whether he's still alive, whether he's still performing magic somewhere. She doesn't have answers, and the manhwa doesn't provide them. Lee Eul has disappeared as completely as any of his best vanishing tricks, leaving only the impact he made on his students' lives. But this absence feels appropriate rather than frustrating. Magicians are supposed to disappear, to leave audiences wondering how they did it, to maintain mystery even after the performance ends. Ah-ee acknowledges that she doesn't know if Lee Eul is alive, or if he succeeded in his escape, or what happened to him after he vanished from the park. But she knows that his magic continues, that the lessons he taught persist, that the wonder he awakened in her is still active in her life and work. In that sense, Lee Eul never really left. He's present every time she performs magic, every time she chooses wonder over practicality, every time she helps a child believe in impossible things. The epilogue also shows us how Ah-ee's younger sister has turned out. She's grown up more stable and less traumatized than Ah-ee was at the same age, thanks to her older sister's sacrifice and dedication. But she also seems to have inherited or absorbed some of Ah-ee's capacity for wonder, suggesting that magic can be passed down, that each generation can teach the next to believe in impossible things. The final panels of Annarasumanara return to Lee Eul's signature question, "Do you believe in magic?" But this time it's Ah-ee asking it, incorporating the question into her own performances, the way Lee Eul incorporated it into his. She asks children at her shows, and they answer with the enthusiastic affirmation that only children can give, not yet having learned to be cynical or practical. The manhwa ends on this note of hope and continuation. Magic has not died with Lee Eul's disappearance or been crushed by the return to everyday adult life. Instead, it has been passed on, transformed from the magician's gift to his students into a gift they now give to others. The cycle continues, ensuring that wonder persists in a world that desperately needs it. The epilogue confirms that the transformation we witnessed was real and lasting. Ah-ee and Il-kwon have not reverted to their previous selves. They've successfully integrated the lessons they learned into their adult identities, proving that it's possible to grow up without growing into conformity, to become an adult while bringing your dreams with you rather than leaving them behind. But the epilogue also acknowledges costs and complications. Ah-ee's magic career is not glamorous or lucrative. Il-kwon still faces pressure from family and society. Both of them live in a world that doesn't fully appreciate or understand what they've chosen. The magic they believe in doesn't solve all their problems or protect them from all hardship. Life is still difficult in many ways, yet they're clearly happier, more authentic, more themselves than they were at the story's beginning. Ah-ee is no longer the exhausted, cynical girl who worked herself to death without dreaming. Il-deung is no longer the trapped perfectionist with no idea who he really is beyond his test scores. They've become real people with real dreams, and that transformation, that recovery of self, is the greatest magic in the story. The epilogue suggests that what we learned as children, particularly about wonder and joy and possibility, might be more important than what we learn as adults about practicality and conformity. It suggests that the best parts of childhood are not things we should outgrow, but things we should carry forward, integrating them into mature adult identities that are richer and more complete than identities based purely on conventional success. 3 years is not forever, and the epilogue leaves open the possibility that Ah-ee and Il-deung's commitment to magic might face further tests. But it's long enough to demonstrate that their transformation was not temporary, that the lessons learned in the abandoned amusement park have staying power. They've proven to themselves and to readers that believing in magic is not naive escapism, but a valid, sustainable approach to living in a difficult world. The final image is ambiguous and perfect. Ah-ee performing magic, children watching with wide eyes full of wonder, snow falling in summer, or perhaps just the confetti from a magic trick. Or perhaps actual snow because magic makes impossible things possible. We're left uncertain about the literal reality, but completely certain about the emotional truth. Magic is real because belief makes it real, because wonder changes how we experience existence, because choosing dreams over conformity is an act of courage that transforms both the chooser and the world they inhabit. Chapter 12. Closing thoughts and final reflections. Annarasumanara is a story that stays with you long after you've finished reading it, raising questions that don't have simple answers and presenting themes that reward repeated reflection. At its core, it's asking something fundamentally important. What kind of person do you want to be? And what are you willing to sacrifice to become that person? The manhwa never pretends that choosing magic over conformity is easy or without cost. Ah-ee, Il-deung, and Lee Eul all pay prices for their choices. They face social judgment, practical hardship, and the constant pressure to abandon their dreams and return to acceptable paths. The story doesn't minimize these difficulties or suggest that believing in magic will solve all your problems. What it does suggest is that the cost of conformity is ultimately higher than the cost of authenticity. That losing yourself is worse than facing social disapproval. That crushing your dreams leaves you with a life that might technically function but isn't truly alive. Il-kwon's artwork throughout the manhwa is essential to its impact, using visual metaphor and symbolism to convey meaning that dialogue alone could never achieve. The shift from black and white to colour, the use of shadow and light, the panel layouts that become more experimental during magical moments. All of these artistic choices reinforce the story's themes and create an immersive experience that engages readers on multiple levels simultaneously. The black and white artwork deserves special mention because it's so unusual for a Korean manhwa, where colour is typically standard. This choice creates a visual landscape that feels both more realistic and more dreamlike than full colour might achieve. The grey tones emphasise the dreary, grinding quality of everyday life, while making the occasional bursts of colour during magical moments even more striking and significant. The art tells you when magic is happening not through explicit narration, but through chromatic shift that you feel rather than simply see. The story's treatment of mental health, particularly through Lee Eul's backstory, is nuanced and compassionate in ways that are unfortunately rare in media. It neither romanticizes mental illness nor uses it to create artificial danger or drama. Lee Eul's breakdown is presented as a comprehensible response to intolerable pressure, not as weakness or moral failing. His choice to live differently after his hospitalization is framed as a survival strategy rather than an ongoing symptom of illness. The manhwa asks us to consider whether someone who rejects a toxic system might be healthier than those who successfully conform to it. The intergenerational aspect of the story adds important depth. Lee Eul, teaching Ah-ee and Il-jung, who then pass the lessons forward to younger children, creates a lineage of wonder that transcends individual lives. Magic becomes not just a personal philosophy, but a tradition that can be transmitted, ensuring that each generation has access to wonder and possibility, even when society tries to crush these things out of them. This suggests hope for collective rather than just individual transformation. The story's refusal to definitively answer whether magic is real is one of its greatest strengths. By leaving this question open, the manhwa invites readers to decide for themselves what they believe and what that belief means. The ambiguity is not a weakness or failure to commit, but a deliberate choice that respects reader intelligence and allows the story to function as metaphor without requiring literal, supernatural elements. Whether Lee Eul's magic is supernatural or simply extraordinary skill combined with the power of belief, the transformative effect on his students is undeniably real. Annarasumanara also serves as social criticism without being preachy or didactic. It shows us the costs of educational pressure, economic inequality, and conformity-focused culture without stopping to lecture about these problems. The story trusts readers to recognize the issues and draw their own conclusions about what should change. This restraint makes the criticism more effective than explicit political messaging might achieve. The romantic elements in the story are handled with unusual subtlety for the medium. The developing connection between Ah-ee and Il-jung matters, but it's never the central focus or the thing that saves either character. They save themselves through their growing belief in magic and connection to their own authentic selves. Their relationship supports this process, but doesn't replace it. This treatment avoids the common narrative trap where romance solves all problems and suggests instead that authentic human connection is one component of a meaningful life, but not the only component. The title itself, Annarasumanara, is significant. It's a magical incantation, a made-up word that sounds like it should have meaning, even though it doesn't translate to anything specific. This perfectly captures the story's approach to magic. It's not about the specific mechanics or literal reality, but about the power of words and belief to transform experience. Saying the magic words, whether they're Annarasumanara or I believe in magic, changes something essential about how we engage with life. For readers who are themselves young people facing pressure to conform, to give up dreams, to measure themselves by achievement rather than authentic self, Annarasumanara offers both validation and hope. It acknowledges how difficult it is to resist these pressures while insisting that resistance is possible and worthwhile. It provides examples of characters who chose differently and survived, who found ways to be themselves despite everything working against them. This representation matters enormously for people who feel alone in their struggles against conformity. For readers who are past their youth and may have already abandoned dreams in favor of practicality, the story offers something different but equally valuable. The suggestion that it's not too late, that you can reclaim wonder even after years of living without it, that becoming more authentically yourself is possible at any age. Lee Eul himself made this choice as an adult, rebuilding his life around magic after his previous life nearly killed him. If transformation is possible for him, it's possible for anyone. The story also functions as a meditation on art and its role in human life. Magic, like all art, is not practically necessary for survival. You can live without it. But life without art, without magic, without beauty and wonder, is a diminished life. Existence rather than living. Annarasumanara insists that art is not a luxury or a distraction, but an essential human need, and that societies that treat it as frivolous or disposable are damaging themselves in fundamental ways. The community of believers that forms between Ah-ee Il and Lee Eul, and later extends to others they influence, suggests that we don't have to face conformity pressure alone. Finding others who share your values, who understand your commitment to wonder and authenticity, creates support systems that make resistance to conformity more sustainable. The story implies that these communities of believers are forming everywhere, often invisibly, giving each other courage to live differently. Ultimately, Annarasumanara is about the radical courage required to be yourself in a world that demands you be something else. It's about the importance of wonder in a cynical world, the necessity of dreams in the face of harsh reality, and the transformative power of believing that life can contain more than just survival and achievement. It's about growing up in the best sense, becoming more fully yourself rather than less, carrying childhood wonder forward into adulthood rather than leaving it behind. The story has found audiences worldwide, resonating with people from different cultures who recognize the same pressures in their own societies. While it's set in South Korea and addresses specifically Korean issues around education and family, the themes are universal. Every society has its own version of the pressure to conform, its own ways of crushing individuality and dreams. Annarasumanara speaks to all of them, offering a vision of how individual resistance to these pressures might look and why it matters. As we finish this journey through the story, Lee Eul's question echoes one final time. Do you believe in magic? Not magic in the sense of supernatural powers, though the story leaves that possibility open. Magic in the sense of wonder, possibility, authenticity, the courage to live according to your own values rather than society's expectations. Magic as the refusal to let life drain all the color and joy out of existence. Magic as the commitment to staying human in dehumanizing systems. Your answer to that question matters, because it shapes how you'll live, what you'll accept, what you'll resist, who you'll become. The magic you believe in will determine the life you lead and the person you grow into. Annarasumanara doesn't insist you believe, but it shows you what's possible if you do, what you might gain and what you might have to sacrifice, and it trusts you to make your own choice. The abandoned amusement park still stands somewhere, waiting for the next person who needs it. The Ferris wheel might turn again for someone ready to see their life from a different perspective. Magic persists in the ruins and the shadows, in forgotten places and quiet moments, available to anyone desperate or brave enough to believe in it. The question is always waiting to be asked and answered anew. Do you believe in magic? This has been the complete story of Annarasumanara, a manhwa about magic, dreams, and growing up. Thank you for taking this journey with us through the abandoned amusement park and into the heart of wonder itself. If you enjoyed this exploration, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to 2 Sleep Manhwa for more deep dives into the beautiful, heartbreaking, and thought-provoking worlds of Korean manhwa. Share this with anyone who needs a reminder that magic is real if you believe in it, and that it's never too late to reclaim your dreams. Until next time, keep believing in impossible things. Keep looking for magic in unexpected places, and never let anyone convince you that wonder is childish or dreams are impractical. In a world that tries to make us all the same, choosing to be authentically yourself is the greatest magic of all. Annarasumanara, do you believe in magic?